Chapter 1563. Finally, a peerless saint showed up? A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes and he said, "Don't worry. I didn't intend to hide the fact that I'm rebuilding the city of Tao from the beginning. However, I'm surprised that the enemies of the 8 regions didn't notice it until now." Xiaohao and Ruowu were both stunned. "Brother Xiaohao, you just need to rest and recuperate. I'll take care of the rest." Lin Sun didn't explain anything and said, "In addition, I'd like to trouble Miss Ruowu to spread a message for me." "What's the matter?" Ruowu was curious. "Tell them that I'll rebuild the city of Tao in 3 months. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and said calmly. "What?" Ruowu and Xiaohao were both shocked. "If the enemy knows about it, I just want them to know." Lin Sun said, "Of course there's another purpose, which is to let the strong people of the ancient Desolation Realm and other regions hear the news and come to join us. The enemy is coming on a large scale. I'm afraid we can't resist them with our current strength." Xiaohao frowned. Lin Sun said with a smile, "Just wait and see." Xiaohao and Ruowu looked at each other, wondering why Lin Sun was so confident. But in the end, they didn't ask any more questions. If Lin Sun wanted to tell them, he would have done it long ago. But in this way, both of them were a little curious about what method Lin Sun would use to resist the foreign enemies. From this day on, Lin Sun left the camp frequently. Over a black ocean, Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep. The power of wind-mocking eyes was running in his pupils, scanning and exploring the depths of the ocean. After a while, he suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed something. Boom! The sea suddenly rolled and the waves were like thunder. A spiritual vein as thick as a house, thousands of meters long, was drawn out. It looked like a huge python dragon. Dazzling divine luster filled the air. Pure and heavy spiritual chi evaporated and turned into a rain of light, looking extremely sacred. This was a rare, saint-level spiritual vein, mixed with a strong divine aura, which was extremely valuable. If it was in the outside world, a spirit vein like this would be enough to build an excellent grotto heaven. Clatter! Lin Sun waved his sleeves, put away the spiritual vein, and floated away. It was a sandy beach with jagged rocks of strange shapes. Rumble! A huge crack was cut open on the ground by a sword light. Lin Sun flashed into the depths of the crack. 1,000 zhang. 3,000 zhang. When Lin Sun reached the depth of 90,000 meters, a dazzling red glow came into his sight. This was another saint-level spirit vein of excellent quality. The 9 regions battlefield was an extremely mysterious world built between the 9 realms. It was dotted with many secret realms and small worlds that contained many rare treasures in the outside world. Even the quality of the spirit vein was shockingly high. With the help of wind-mocking eyes, Lin Sun collected hundreds of spiritual veins in less than 20 days. Some spirit veins were over 10 kilometers long and completely gorgeous, and the aura of divinity dyed the surrounding space gorgeous. Some of them were only more than 30 meters long, but the purity of their spiritual energy was enough to shock a peerless saint like Lin Sun. These spirit veins were the key to providing energy for the 4 Absolutes 8 Imperials' sacred formation. Late at night, in the temporary camp, Lin Sun finished everything at hand and stood alone in the night, looking into the distance. Nearly half a year had passed since he entered this place. During this half a year, Lin Sun spent most of his time deducing formations, refining formation plates, and collecting formation materials. But it was all worth it. Just like now, he just needed to gather enough materials to start rebuilding the city of Tao Protectors. Standing alone in the night for a long time, Lin Sun murmured in his heart, "Everything is ready. Just wait for the wind." At the same time, the news that Lin Sun wanted to rebuild the city of Tao spread throughout the entire 9 regions battlefield under Ruowu's intentional promotion. For a time, it shocked the world. This guy is announcing this so openly. Isn't he worried about being suppressed by the enemies of the 8 regions? Heavenly Fire World. In a secret realm in the depths of a remote mountain, Yi Chen, who had just returned, also brought back the news, which made Laughing at the Heavens frown. Laughing at the Heavens and Yi Chen met when they entered the Nine Regions battlefield, and they hid together in Heavenly Fire World. Do you think Lin Sun is that kind of brainless person? Yi Chen's eyes were burning. I think it's time for us to leave. I've been a coward for nearly a year. If I stay here any longer, I'll be depressed. Laughing at the Heavens was silent for a long time. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Then let's go. I've had enough of him." The two looked at each other and smiled. At the same time, most of the surviving experts in the ancient Desolation realm in the Nine Regions battlefield were tempted when they heard the news. Lin Sun. He was a legendary figure in the ancient Desolation realm. Since he dared to do this, he must have something to rely on. No one thought that Lin Sun would overestimate himself. This was the prestige and reputation of Lin Sun, which was built by the killing and bloody battles he had gone through in the past years. Let's go. Even if there are many dangers along the way, I have to return to the ancient Desolation realm and meet with the others. Someone gritted his teeth. After hiding for so long, I finally heard such good news. I can't stay indifferent even if I have to pay with my life. Someone's eyes were firm. Such things began to happen in different regions. The experts in the ancient Desolation realm who had been hiding and enduring all began to take action. Their goal was to go to the ancient Desolation realm. But at the same time, many experts in the ancient Desolation realm chose to stay on the sidelines after hearing the news. Lin Sun was indeed strong and courageous, but this was the Nine Regions battlefield after all. How could the enemies of the 8 regions sit still after hearing the news? There was no doubt that the ancient Desolation realm had become the center of the storm. It was destined to be targeted long ago, and unimaginable killings would break out at any time. It was too unwise to go there at this time. Unless, if Lin Sun could really rebuild the City of Path and resist the attacks of the enemies of the 8 regions, perhaps it would be time for him to return to the ancient Desolation realm. However, these experts who decided to stay on the sidelines all thought that the possibility was very slim. The reason was very simple. The strength and foundation of the enemies of the 8 regions were too terrifying. Just thinking about it made people feel desperate. This was a matter of personal choice. Although they were on the same side, not every expert in the ancient Desolation realm was willing to support Lin Sun at the risk of their lives. The North Underworld realm. In the palace on the Fuyao Sea. This little bastard is really arrogant. Doesn't he know how the ancient Desolation realm's city of Dao Protection was conquered in the previous 2 battles between the 9 realms? An old voice laughed, full of mockery. According to the records left by the ancestors of my clan, the city of Path Protector was conquered in the first battle of the 9 regions. A total of 300,000 two-legged sheep were slaughtered. At that time, blood rained from the sky for 10 days. In the second battle of the 9 regions, the ancient Desolation realm wanted to rebuild the city of Path Protector, but it was destroyed by the allied forces of the 8 regions on the way. 90,000 people were slaughtered on the spot. Now, Lin Sun still dares to do this. Isn't he afraid of repeating the same mistake? He's not courting death. I'm afraid he wants to kill all the two-legged sheep in the ancient Desolation realm. Laughter rang out in the hall. When they heard that Lin Sun was going to rebuild the city of Path Protector, their first reaction was that this kid must have a screw loose. Even if he wanted to die, he didn't have to be so anxious. Then, there were all sorts of sounds of contempt, ridicule, and laughter. Young master, as long as you give the order, I will bring people to flatten the ancient wasteland world. A voice that sounded like a great bell rang out. At that moment, all the people in the hall looked at Kuan Xiaoyu. Kuan Xiaoyu picked up his cup and took a sip of the rich and fragrant liquor. Only then did he smile. His eyes were deep as he spoke slowly. If the heavens want him dead, then he'll definitely go mad. That kid said that he'll rebuild the city of Tao Protectors in the ancient desolation dimension 3 months from now. Since it's like that, then I'll naturally give him a lethal blow at that time. After a pause, he changed the topic and said, however, we can't just rely on the northern Darkstar ancient realm. Young master, are you saying that you want to pull in the forces of the other 7 regions to attack together? Someone asked. Not bad. Kuan Xiaoyu said calmly, kill the ancient desolation first, then we can compete. The 8 regions have always been united against the ancient desolation region. We advance and retreat together, so we can't leave them out of this. Next, I'll personally write letters to inform their leaders one by one. After that, he raised his head and drank the wine in his cup. It had been nearly a year since the opening of the 9-region battlefield. It was time to complete the goal of killing the ancient desolation first. Soon, the letters written by Kuan Xiaoyu were sent to the leaders of the other realms. The day Lin Sun rebuilds the city of Tao Protectors will be the day of his destruction. At that time, I hope that everyone will send 10 peerless sages to lead an army of 30,000 to the ancient desolation dimension. After receiving the news, Jian Qinchen, the first descendant of the Sky Sword Pavilion, only thought for a moment and agreed. Agreed. Zhu Yingkong, the imperial prince of the Candle Dragon bloodline, also agreed. 10 peerless sages and 30,000 soldiers were only equivalent to 1/10 of the strength of the ancient desolation dimension. That's how it should be. Hua Hongxiao, the successor of the Divine Path sect in the East Mulberry Ancient Domain, said with a sonorous voice and astonishing killing intent. Qi Wushu of the Jili Ancient Domain, Lai Qian of the Heaven Fire Ancient Domain, and Shi Pohei of the Star Fiend Ancient Domain also agreed. No matter which force it was, they naturally could not tolerate the ancient desolation dimension rebuilding the city of Tao Protectors. However, when the news reached the Blood Demon realm, to everyone's surprise, Xueqingyi rejected it without even thinking about it. Tell Kuan Xiaoyu that the Blood Demon Ancient Domain is not interested in intervening in this matter for the time being. This decision had not yet spread, but it had already caused a storm in the Blood Demon realm. The experts from the various forces of the Blood Demon Ancient Domain all felt depressed. Why did Xueqingyi become more and more timid? Chapter 1564. Voices of dissatisfaction, anger, and grievance began to ring out from different clans in the Blood Demon realm. Who could forget the guy called Lin Sun, who had slaughtered his way from the depths of the God-refining forest all the way to the city of Tao Protectors? Who could forget the guy who had surrounded an entire city all by himself and destroyed the reputation of the Blood Demon Ancient Region? But Xueqingyi, not only did he not seek revenge, he chose to endure. He even withdrew all the forces that the Blood Demon Ancient Region had sent to the ancient wasteland realm. This matter was shameful enough to make him the laughingstock of the other realms. But now, faced with the best opportunity to destroy the ancient wasteland realm, Xueqingyi actually chose to endure. He did not even intend to send a single soldier. Was he still one of the 8 skills of Green Hell? Was he the leader of the younger generation of the Blood Demon Ancient Region? Why was he so cowardly? But no matter how angry they were, no one could change Xueqingyi's mind. In the Blood Demon realm, Xueqingyi was the one who had the final say. No matter how aggrieved and dissatisfied the experts of the Blood Demon Ancient Region were, they could only endure it. Each realm will send out 10 peerless sages and 30,000 soldiers. In total, there will be 70 peerless sages and 210,000 soldiers. If Lin Sun can't hold on, the experts of the ancient wasteland realm will definitely be wiped out. But what if Lin Sun can hold on? Xueqingyi stood alone in the hall with a cold smile on his handsome face. Last time, a total of 30 peak saints of our Blood Demon Ancient Region were killed by Lin Sun. This time, even if Lin Sun's blade is broken, he'll definitely drag a group of people down with him. Why should our Blood Demon Ancient Region make such a pointless sacrifice? Let's just watch the show. No matter who wins or loses, it will only benefit the blood demon ancient region. Xueqingyi took a deep breath. Her depressed emotions returned to normal and she was completely unperturbed. When Xueqingyi's decision reached Kuan Xiaoyu's ears, he could not help but be stunned. Since when did this guy become so tolerant? When the news spread to the other 7 realms, it caused a lot of laughter. Could it be that Xueqingyi is terrified by that little bastard Lin Sun? Humph, I think it's time for Xueqingyi to be removed from the 8 absolutes of Green Hell. He has no guts at all. Isn't Xueqingyi worried that her prestige will be damaged? How shameful! What is he thinking? Amidst the heated discussions, the blood demon ancient region became the target of ridicule for the other 7 regions. In any case, the news that 7 of the 8 regions would launch an attack on the day Lin Sun built the city still caused a sensation in the 9-region battlefield. Amidst the changing winds and clouds, the somber atmosphere of a storm. During this period of time, many experts from the ancient Desolation Realm came from all directions to the temporary campsite of the ancient Desolation Realm. The temporary camp suddenly became lively. Lin Sun also met many familiar old friends, such as Laughing at the Heavens, Yechun, Ji Xingyao, Mi Hengzhen, and so on. However, Zhao Jingxian was not there. Lin Sun sighed in his heart because of this, and he decided that he would head over to investigate and find out about Zhao Jingxian once the city of Dao Protectors was completed. As time went by, about 50,000 experts from the ancient Desolation Realm had gathered in the temporary camp. Most of them were ordinary Immortal Realm kings. There were also some true saints, but in terms of overall combat strength, the ancient Desolation Realm was indeed much weaker than the other 8 regions. Even among those top figures, only Lin Sun, Xiaohao, and Ruowu were at the peak of the Saint Realm. It could be said that in terms of overall strength, the ancient Desolation Realm was not qualified to fight against any of the other 8 regions. In particular, when the news that the 7 regions would join forces to attack on the day Lin Sun built the city spread, the originally lively atmosphere in the huge temporary camp became depressing. Even though many experts from the ancient Desolation Realm had made up their minds to go in and out with Lin Sun, they still felt worried under such circumstances. The disparity was too great. They could not even see much hope. Even experts like Ruowu and Xiaohao, who had great confidence in Lin Sun, could not help but feel gloomy. If they could build the city successfully, it would be worth it no matter how many sacrifices they had to make. But what if they failed? That would definitely lead to the tragic outcome of the entire army being wiped out and captured in one fell swoop. As the time of building the city drew closer, the atmosphere in the camp became more and more depressing. Many experts even felt uneasy. It was even to the extent that many people couldn't help but feel regret, and they blamed themselves for rashly coming here on impulse. Seeing this situation, Ruowu and Xiaohao couldn't help but frown. The enemy was still coming, but their fighting spirit was shaken, which was not good. I don't know what Lin Sun is thinking. Ruowu couldn't help murmuring. These days, Lin Sun had been acting as if nothing had happened. Every day, he carried the spiritual veins and placed them in different areas nearby, laying and arranging the hollow golden sand that had been refined long ago. He was completely indifferent to the situation in the camp. The calmer and more casual he is, the more confident I'll be. If he's like the others, filled with worry and sighing, then I don't think there's any need to rebuild the city of Dao Protectors at all. We can just admit defeat. Xiaohao said with a smile. How can you still laugh? Ruowu glanced at him. Xiaohao sneered. I'm just finding joy in sorrow. Finding joy in sorrow? Why do I feel that you have nothing better to do? A laugh sounded. Lin Sun had come from afar. Although he looked relaxed, he could not hide the exhaustion between his eyebrows. These days, he was the only one who had been setting up the formation. It had cost him a lot of energy and effort just to inscribe the vast Taoist pattern formation. Others could not help with such a large sacred formation at all, and no mistakes could be tolerated. Lin Sun could only work hard alone. The formation is done? Xiao Hao's eyes lit up. Lin Sun nodded. Now there is one more thing to do. What is it? If you want to build a city, it must be unbreakable. The corpses and blood of the enemies are just decorations. To support the foundation of a city, we need divine materials. Lin Sun said, so, I need your help to refine a batch of hollow golden sand. The more, the better. It's better to have enough to build a city. Xiao Hao and Ruo Wu gasped. Build a city with hollow golden sand? It was a crazy idea. Yes, if you don't want to do it, you should at least build an immortal city that no one can break in the 9 regions battlefield. Lin Sun's black eyes were shining and he said firmly, in this way, in the future, even if the battle of the 9 regions breaks out again, the strong in the ancient desolation region will not have to hide anymore. With the power of this city, we can be invincible. Both Xiao Hao and Ruo Wu were moved. Only now did they understand that Lin Sun's intention of building a city was bigger and more far-reaching than they had imagined. After a while, Xiao Hao joked, I thought you really planned to build a city with the corpses of the enemies. Turns out that you have other ideas. Lin Sun smiled, don't worry. The corpses of the enemies will definitely be piled up on every brick of the city. In the following period of time, Xiao Hao and Ruo Wu were also busy. One of them went to collect hollow golden sand, and the other led a group of true sages to refine piles of hollow golden sand into huge brick. Then, on each brick, Lin Sun engraved a different pattern of Tao. As for the other strong in the camp, they also divided the work and divided the corpses and blood in the corpse mountain and blood pool, refined them, and polished them into materials for building the city. The day of building the city was getting closer and closer. On this day, Xiao Hao hurried back to the temporary camp and brought back a piece of news. The forces of the 7 territories have arrived at the border of the ancient desolation realm. For a moment, the atmosphere in the temporary camp was unprecedentedly solemn. Everyone's heart was tight. Who wouldn't be nervous before a storm? Only Lin Sun was a little surprised. Why is there no power of the blood demon ancient region? Xueqingyi decided to bear with it. Now, he has become a laughingstock in the 8 regions, and his personal reputation has fallen to the bottom. Xiao Hao's expression was strange. This guy is a smart guy. Lin Sun was stunned, and then he commented. As he spoke, Lin Sun flew into the sky and stood under the sky. He spread his spiritual awareness and looked around. With the temporary camp as the center, within a radius of 100 miles, there was a tall golden stone mountain at regular intervals. These mountains were all made of huge stone bricks made of hollow gold sand. For this, Xiao Hao almost emptied the hollow gold sand distributed in the secret realm. Below this area, where no one could see, were Dao rune formation diagrams. The patterns were engraved on the materials of the formation. Below the patterns, there were huge saint-level spiritual veins intertwined like coiling dragons. Lin Sun, who had a panoramic view of all this, couldn't help but feel excited. When building the city, blood should be used as a sacrifice. 10 days later. There were only 7 days left before the day of building the city. On this day, Xiao Hao, who had been patrolling outside, returned to the temporary camp at full speed. Get ready, everyone! The enemy is coming! Xiao Hao's shout was like thunder, resounding over the temporary camp. For a moment, all the strong in the camp were stiff and their faces changed. The enemy had come 7 days in advance? Swish! At the same time, Lin Sun's figure rose into the sky. His moon-white robe fluttered, his handsome face was full of spirit, and his dark eyes were deep and bright. I knew they wouldn't foolishly wait for the day of building the city. His cold voice resounded through the camp, making everyone stunned. So Lin Sun had expected this? Thinking of this, all the strong felt inexplicably relaxed, as if they were infected by the confidence in Lin Sun's words. Brother Lin, the war is coming. How sure are you? Someone couldn't help shouting. Chapter 1565. Lin Sun looked down at the tens of thousands of figures in the camp, looking at their nervous and expectant faces. Inexplicably, he felt a sense of pride and said, "You don't need to participate in this battle. Just watch it." His voice was loud and clear, stirring the wilderness. Xiaohao and Ruowu were both stunned. Everyone present was also stunned. Was Lin going to fight against the army of the 7 regions alone? For a moment there was a dead silence in the huge camp. Everyone looked incredulous. Before, they had all made up their minds to live and die together with the camp, and they had taken life and death lightly. Who would have thought that Lin Sun would fight alone? This was too unexpected, completely out of everyone's expectations. "Brother Lin, Xiaohao couldn't help saying. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and said with a smile, "Brother Xiaohao, just like Ruowu, you just need to stay in the camp and watch the battle." No matter if it was his expression, words, or actions, they were all calm and composed. If it wasn't for this, Xiaohao, Ruowu, and the others would probably suspect that he had gone mad. There were 70 top sages and 210,000 soldiers. Looking at the battlefield of the 9 regions, who dared to threaten to fight against the army of the 7 regions alone like Lin Sun did? This was no longer daring, it was simply insanity. In the temporary camp, everyone was excited. Where did Lin Sun's confidence come from? "Well, I'll accompany you." Xiaohao took a deep breath and said firmly, "Don't force yourself. This is the camp of the ancient desolation realm. We won't just watch you fight with your life." Ruowu said seriously. All the people in the camp nodded. The enemy came faster than he had expected. Whoosh! Suddenly, from all directions of the temporary camp, there was a burst of horns, mixed with the roar of war drums. The sky and the earth roared, and the wind and clouds changed. A terrifying murderous aura that was visible to the naked eye quickly spread out like dark clouds, covering the sky above the temporary camp and making it dark. The campsite was deathly silent, and everyone felt suffocated. The boundless bugle horn and rumbling drum sounds were like enormous hammers that fiercely smashed into their hearts, causing everyone's expression to change. The enemy had yet to arrive, but the overwhelming killing intent had already arrived. At this moment, no matter how much confidence they had in Lin Sun, the tens of thousands of experts from the ancient desolation realm in the camp all felt an unprecedented pressure. Not long after, the earth trembled, sand and pebbles flew, and the killing intent was like a raging storm, completely enveloping the temporary camp. In that instant it was as if doomsday had arrived. Even Xiaohao and Ruowu were startled. They rose into the air and glanced at the surroundings. Waves of smoke appeared on the distant horizon, turning into terrifying black clouds that covered heaven and earth. War drums rumbled, ringing through the world. There were boundless bugle horns, and an austere aura engulfed everything. If one were to take a closer look, they would see a dense crowd of people approaching from all directions like a black tide. Dark clouds loomed over the city, threatening to destroy it. One by one, the dignified figures of the 7 regions led the army of the 7 regions and surged toward the temporary camp from different directions. The peerless sages were like rulers, not bothering to conceal their terrifying auras as they charged forward. Behind them were tens of thousands of troops, including thousands of true sages and innumerable peerless kings of the longevity tribulation realm. When they gathered together, only the aura they emitted turned into a terrible vision, raging between heaven and earth. This was not an army of ordinary people, nor was it an army of ordinary practitioners. Instead, it was an army led by peak sages and formed by many true sages and longevity tribulation monarchs. Such a scene was enough to make anyone desperate in the ancient desolation realm. Xiaohao and Ruowu looked at each other with a serious expression and a chill in their hearts. There were only 70 peerless sages, which was an extremely terrifying number. Not to mention that there were 210,000 sages in the army, and the weakest among them was a king of the longevity tribulation realm. Could Lin Sun fight this battle alone? Xiaohao and Ruowu were shaken for a moment, and their eyes simultaneously looked at Lin Sun, who was standing in the sky in front of the camp in the distance. Lin Sun still stood there without moving in the slightest, and he was like an immovable rock. Only an azure-skinned wine gourd had appeared in his hand, and he was drinking wine with a leisurely bearing. He seemed as if he'd turned a blind eye to the battle that was about to arrive. "Who is the little bastard named Lin Sun? Come out!" Suddenly, a loud roar resounded in the sky, and a tall figure like a demon god soared into the sky. It was a powerful man with hair as black as ink, more than 30 meters tall, and circles of vortex ripples appeared all over his body. What made people tremble was that behind his head there was a shadow of a divine wheel, which was vast and undulating, and a huge koan was stirring up waves. Koan Bashio. He was a peerless sage of the Koan family, an imperial family in the northern underworld ancient domain, and also one of the leaders of the coalition army of the 7 regions. It was just a loud roar, but it resounded in everyone's heart like a clap of thunder, and made all the overlords in the ancient desolation realm pale. Such power was simply too terrifying. Humph! A cold light flashed in Xiaohao's eyes, and he was about to take action. But at this moment, Lin Sun gently flicked his fingers, and suddenly stepped forward. With a rumble, an indescribably terrifying power rose from his body. At that moment, his black hair fluttered in the wind, and a brilliant light flowed around his body, crushing and destroying the dark clouds and murderous chi that covered the sky. And the oppressive power of Koan Bachio was also destroyed in an instant. His face changed slightly, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. At the same time, all the people in the temporary camp felt relaxed, and all the depression and discomfort were swept away. When they looked at Lin Sun again, there was a touch of fanaticism in their eyes. It was also at this moment that they finally saw with their own eyes how powerful Lin Sun, who had set foot on the peak of the Saint Realm, was. Outside the temporary camp, the army of the 7 regions, which was pressing in from all directions, also fixed their eyes on Lin Sun, who stood high in the void. It was also the first time they saw this young man who had killed so many people in the blood demon world, and besieged an entire city by himself. Now that they saw it, he was indeed extraordinary. The saints from the 7 regions couldn't help but be surprised, and they realized that the rumors were not exaggerated. It was unexpected that such a dazzling figure could emerge from the ancient desolation. But that was all. They came prepared this time. A total of 70 saints attacked, and none of the 8 invincibles of green destiny dared to face them head-on. In the sky, Lin Sun put away the green wine gourd in his hand, glanced at Koan Bachio, and said, "Because of this sentence, you will die a horrible death." His indifferent voice, with undisguised contempt, resounded in the vast space, and everyone was stunned. The army was pressing down on the city, and the ancient desolation was at a dead end. How dare this boy be so arrogant? "Ha, Koan Bachio, did you hear that? This little bastard is not going to let you go." Someone laughed. Then, a burst of laughter filled the air. Someone mocked and pretended to be surprised. "Didn't you say that you're going to rebuild the city of Tao Protectors? Why does it look so desolate?" Someone else laughed. "That's not right. Look, those golden mountains are clearly the bricks they used to build the city. Of course, they are just piles of stones." The allied army of the 7 regions seemed fearless and calm. Their faces were filled with hideous, cruel, and cold smiles. In the beginning, they thought that there was already a city here, but when they arrived, there wasn't even a city wall to protect them from the wind and rain. There were only tens of thousands of 2-legged sheep from the ancient desolation region, gathered together like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. This made them even more calm, fearless, and unbridled. Damn it! These bastards are still as arrogant as ever. In the temporary camp, the crowd was enraged. Their expressions were ugly, and they gritted their teeth in anger. "Everyone, don't underestimate these 2-legged sheep. They might have set up many restrictions here." An old man in a Taoist robe with a youthful face and white hair spoke up. Lin soon put away his smile, glanced at the old man, and said indifferently, "You're right. I've set up a forbidden formation within a radius of 100 miles. Well, the place where you're standing now is already in the forbidden formation." Everyone was shocked when they heard that. Koan Ba Chio and the other peerless saints' eyes flickered. They spread out their divine senses, but they couldn't sense any aura from the restriction formation. "Humph, you're just playing tricks," someone said proudly. "So what if there's a restriction formation? Do you think it can stop our attacks?" The others sneered as well. "That's right, so what if there's a restriction formation? We can just break it with force. Stop your attacks?" Lin soon showed a hint of mockery. "Ignorant. When I set up the formation, I only thought about how to kill you. I never thought about stopping you." "Kill us?" Koan Ba Chio was so angry that he laughed as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Tens of thousands of soldiers from the 7 regions also laughed. Lin Sun was really arrogant to the point that he didn't know what was good for him. "Stop talking nonsense with him. Let's do it," someone shouted. "Let's kill this guy together. The rest of you, go and flatten this place. Remember, don't let a 2-legged sheep go," someone said with a sonorous voice and a murderous intent. Boom. At this moment, unparalleled murderous intent rumbled between heaven and earth. Heaven and earth surged, and the weather changed. The 7 regions' armies all moved. The terrifying aura alone made the cultivators from the ancient desolation realm stiff all over and stinging their skin. If they faced it head-on, it would be no different from hitting a stone with an egg. At the same time, Lin Sun also sensed that dozens of auras belonging to peerless saints had locked onto him from all directions. "Attack!" Koan Ba Chio shouted like thunder. Chapter 1566. Between heaven and earth, the horns were loud and the war drums were thunderous. The 210,000 soldiers of the 7 regions attacked from different directions and different areas. Treasures and Tao arts that covered the heavens and the earth flashed up, and they developed into various terrifying phenomena as they charged towards the temporary campsite. It was dense, just like a storm. The void was chaotic, the earth was shaking, and the world lost its color at this moment, submerged by the gorgeous and magnificent light. That scene was like the end of the world. It was too horrible. Even Xiaohao and Ruowu couldn't help but gasp when they saw this scene, and their faces changed slightly. And Koan Ba Chio and other top sages had already taken action before such a full-scale attack. They moved horizontally in the void and rushed up to kill. Their target was Lin Sun. The situation had suddenly become extremely dangerous. However, at the same time, Lin Sun waved his sleeves, and a divine rainbow swept up. There were a total of 24 formation flags refined by a group of holy treasures. They swept into different directions of the temporary camp and disappeared in a flash. In the depths of the ground where no one could see, a dazzling light suddenly emerged from the Taoist pattern formation that had been covered, as if waking up from silence. Boom, 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 boom. In a flash, the world was turned upside down. 8 defensive formations rose from the ground, and the dense and vast Taoist pattern formation spread out like a vast ocean, covering the huge temporary camp. Looking from a distance, it was like a magnificent giant eggshell, inverted on the temporary camp, reflecting a dazzling golden light curtain. In the light curtain, the Taoist pattern, like the light rain of flying immortals, flowed and evolved into illusory phantoms of gods. Some of them meditated solemnly, some recited scriptures, and some wandered around with halberds in their hands. It was just like a kingdom of gods, brilliant, sacred, boundless, and unshakable. 8 defense formation. At the same time, Lin Sun made a gesture with his fingers, and 4 holy treasures refined as formation plates swept out and disappeared in the void. "Rise!" Lin Sun shouted like thunder in spring. Boom! A grand formation that was formed from dazzling starlight suddenly surged into appearance 300 m away from where his figure stood. As soon as it appeared, it was like an expanse of the starry sky had appeared in the world, and it emanated a boundless, cold, and vast feeling of terror. Absolute sky of the four-terminal formation. Lin soon completed a series of movements in an instant, incredibly fast. At this moment, the group of sages had arrived. Boom! Deafening and terrifying sounds of collision resounded out in the sky, and it was simply like numerous volcanoes had erupted at the same time. Blazing rays of light shot out while a rain of light raged, and it caused this entire expanse of the heavens and the earth to shake. What? Screams rang out. As expected, they had already set up a great formation. In the distance, the eyes of the group of peak saints flickered. They were bewildered and somewhat surprised. In their field of vision, the place where Lin stood was like a starry sky, with rivers of stars flowing, drifting and twinkling, drawing mysterious and obscure trajectories. Previously, all of their attacks had been dissolved when they collided with the formation. On the other hand, Lin soon stood towering in the starry sky with his black hair fluttering in the wind, and his entire body bathed in brilliant starlight. He was pure and ethereal, and he simply seemed like a son of the stars. Rumble. Following that, a series of intensive and ear-piercing collisions rang out, covering the sky and earth, surging in all directions and causing the earth to crack. Then, exclamations rang out incessantly. The temporary camp was covered by a layer of golden light curtain, and the Taoist pattern formation turned into the phantoms of various deities sitting in it, like a kingdom of deities. The terrifying attacks whizzing in from all directions were all blocked by the golden light curtain, causing collisions, but they could not shake it at all. The army of the seven regions was restless and couldn't believe it. They had thought that this attack alone would be enough to destroy the temporary camp. But who would have thought that such a shocking change would happen? What kind of formation was that? How could it block the attack of their army? In the temporary camp, Xiaohao and Ruowu's tense hearts both relaxed at this moment, feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Just now, they almost couldn't help but attack. Laughing in the heavens, Yechen, Yu Jianming, and the other experts of the ancient desolation realm also cheered at this moment. No one knew how nervous, perturbed, and depressed they were before. They all thought that under this attack, it was very likely that they would suffer heavy casualties. But who would have thought that a golden light curtain that covered the sky and the sun appeared, protecting all of them in it, all of them unscathed. This made them all feel as if they were in a dream. When they looked at Lin Sun's figure standing in the void again, they couldn't help showing excitement, fanaticism, and excitement. These days, they all knew that Lin Sun had been busy setting up the formation day and night, but no one knew how powerful the means he had set up was. But now they understood. Buzz, the golden light curtain emitted sacred light, brilliant and vast, like the most unbreakable fortress in the world, enveloping the temporary camp. And at the forefront, the heavenly slaying formation turned into the image of the starry sky, reflecting around Lin Sun, emitting obscure and palpitating fluctuations. All of this surprised and caught the army of the seven regions off guard, and their faces were uncertain. Humph! It's just a big formation, we can just destroy it. Koenbachio snorted coldly. It's not like we haven't trampled this place in the past battles of the 9 regions. Some people laughed grimly. So what if there was a big formation to stop them? 72 top sages and 210,000 soldiers, how could they just be decoration? Just trample it. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, and his expression was calm. He said indifferently, "Didn't you just ask why we didn't build a city? Because we lack materials. Now that you are here, we can finally start." Koenbachio sneered. This guy couldn't even protect himself, and he still wanted to build a city? This was simply insane and completely insane. Attack! A group of top sages roared. Boom! The vast sound of horns and fierce war drums resounded between heaven and earth again. The army of the 7 regions besieged with all their strength, attacking like the wind. Each and every one of them was like a fierce devil, and they didn't hesitate to attack. Splendid and magnificent Taoism. All kinds of treasures, as if they didn't cost anything, they poured down densely between heaven and earth. The scene was extremely chaotic and terrifying. Even though they knew that there was a big formation to protect them, the experts of the ancient desolation realm couldn't help but feel nervous. This kind of attack was too horrible, like a flood that could easily crush and wipe them out. However, when they saw that these attacks, no matter how fierce and terrible they were all blocked by the big formation without exception, the experts of the ancient desolation realm gradually relaxed. On the other hand, the faces of the army of the 7 regions were gloomy and exasperated. A big formation couldn't be shaken? They didn't believe it. For a moment, their attacks became more and more fierce. Many true sages and kings of the longevity tribulation all used their real strength. However, they didn't notice that deep under their feet, there were many Tao path diagrams running quietly. Go to hell. High in the sky, a group of top sages had already attacked the killing formation of heavens in front of Lin Sun. Their attacks were undoubtedly more terrifying. The power of Taoism they used and the power of the holy treasures they controlled could be said to be extremely terrifying. Under such attacks, the killing formation of heavens tumbled, and the stars around it flickered chaotically. Little bastard, didn't you say that you suppressed the city of Tao protectors in the blood demon ancient realm all by yourself? Why don't you come out now? Someone laughed sarcastically. I just don't want you to miss the wonderful scene when I build the city. Lin Sun's voice was indifferent. Ha ha ha, boy, are you crazy? The big formation in front of you is about to be broken, and you still want to build a city? Many people were amused and burst into laughter. It was indeed ridiculous. With the army in front of them, did this guy think he could stop them with these formations? At this moment, even the experts of the ancient desolation realm in the temporary camp were shocked. How could Lin Sun still have the mood to think about building a city at this time? It's almost time. Open your eyes and watch. But Lin Sun suddenly took a step forward, pointed to the distance, and gently spat out a word from his lips. Rise. Boom. 30 li away, there was a densely packed enemy army entrenched in the ground. But under their feet, runes suddenly rushed out and filled the sky. They were as dazzling as great suns as they rose from the ground. In the blink of an eye, the Earth Punishment Formation appeared in the sky. At the instant it circulated, a myriad of divine swords that were condensed from talisman markings shot out in a dense array that covered the heavens and the earth. Oh no! Dodge! Screams resounded, but it was too late to dodge. In that area, all the enemies who were covered by the formation suffered a fatal blow. Puff, puff, puff. Group after group of figures were slaughtered by the peerlessly swift and fierce sword chi like weeds, causing fresh blood and shattered corpses to spray into the surroundings. In an instant, at least hundreds of people were killed, including several true sages who didn't have time to move. Rumble. When the Earth Execution Killing Formation operated at full power, it was as if there were countless divine swords whistling out in a frenzy. They slaughtered the universe with an unparalleled might. The enemies in the nearby area were completely covered by it. They didn't even have time to dodge. They were swept, crushed, and killed by the torrent of sword chi. The horrible power caused chaos in the field. Exclamations, screams, roars, and shrill screams were heard incessantly. In an instant, the top sages who were bombarding the heavenly slaying formation all narrowed their eyes and changed their faces slightly. In the vicinity of this area, there was actually a boundlessly terrifying killing formation lying in ambush, but from the beginning to the end, they didn't notice it at all. In the temporary camp, the overmatches of the ancient desolation realm also gasped and widened their eyes in excitement. Was this the real killing move of Lin Sun's ambush? It was too fierce. In just a few breaths, More than 3,000 enemies had been killed by the Earth Punishment Formation. Bones and blood were piled up on the ground, and the smell of blood rose to the sky. Some overmatches who were lucky enough to escape the killing formation turned pale with fright, as if they had just escaped from death. The scene just now was undoubtedly too bloody and horrible. Chapter 1567. The bloody and domineering scene caused the atmosphere in the surroundings to become strangely silent. At this time, Lin Sun said indifferently, "Everyone, please take a look. The bones and blood will become part of the materials for building the city." Speaking of this, Lin Sun added coldly, "Of course, this is only a small part, far from enough." Kun Bachyo and the other top sages looked gloomy. However, it was only a few thousand casualties. Among the strong who died, there were only a few true saints. This loss could not affect them much. "Everyone, send a group of people to resist and bombard that formation," someone shouted. The Earth Punishment Formation in the distance was still running, shooting out thousands of divine swords in all directions. It was fierce and domineering, causing harm to the strong in the 7 regions nearby. Immediately, more than a dozen top sages went out to suppress and bombard the power of the Earth Punishment Formation. "Everyone, this is just the beginning. Even if it is to break the formation, there is no need to hurry." Lin Sun looked calm and not surprised at all, as if everything was within his expectations. "Humph! Little bastard, you will die soon. How dare you bark?" Kun Bachyo shouted. Like the other top sages, they took out all kinds of holy treasures and bombarded the heaven-killing formation. Lin Sun pointed in another direction and said, "I said, the show has just begun. Watch." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a thunder in the distance. Boom under the ground, as if an earth dragon was turning over, endless bright runes suddenly emerged, forming a large formation in the void. Within the grand formation, dazzling lightning raged in the sky while arcs of lightning flowed about, and they were dense like a violent waterfall of lightning as they struck down. Purple, red, blue, cyan, black, silver, all kinds of thunder and lightning were full of the power to destroy the world, enough to kill ghosts and gods. God-killing formation. As soon as it appeared, thunder and lightning struck, and hundreds of strong people could not dodge in time. They were killed in an instant and turned into ashes. The strong and domineering murderous aura made everyone exclaim. The most terrifying thing was that those lightning bolts were like chains. They extended outwards and danced wildly between heaven and earth. They were sparkling and dazzling, yet they could even blast a true saint to death. In the temporary camp, the atmosphere was boiling. Hiding in the 8 defenses formation, the group of experts of the ancient desolation realm witnessed this destructive scene with their own eyes. They were all excited, their blood boiling. They could predict that Lin Sun's means must be more than that, but they didn't expect that the power of this formation was so shocking. "Dodge! Damn it! We were tricked by that bastard!" Shrill screams continued to ring out. The expressions of Kun Bachyo and the other peerless sages changed when they saw that. On the way here, they'd investigated and sensed the surroundings, yet they'd clearly not noticed the slightest trace or aura of a restriction. Yet now, accidents had actually occurred one after another, and it caused them to be taken by surprise. Are you surprised? But come to think of it, if you find out, how am I going to catch a turtle in a jar? Lin Sun said calmly. During this period of time, when he was setting up the formation, he'd already thought about all kinds of possible situations. For example, in order not to arouse the enemy's attention, Lin Sun spent a lot of effort to isolate all auras with the unique power of the Taoist pattern formation. Otherwise, how would the enemy dare to approach so fearlessly? This was called catching a turtle in a jar. Kun Bachyo and the others' faces darkened. This damned little bastard, did he really think that he could reverse the situation by setting up a few formations? Let's attack that formation. Immediately, more than a dozen peerless sages moved out and rushed towards the god-breaking kill formation. Whether it was the Earth Punishment Formation or the God-breaking Kill Formation, they were too powerful and could kill a true saint. If they didn't destroy it, it would definitely cause an unimaginable blow to the army of the Seven Territories after a long time. Seeing that the power of the God-breaking Kill Formation was also restrained, Kun Bachyo and the others finally relaxed and looked at Lin Sun coldly. "Little bastard, what else do you have? Just use it!" someone shouted. As they spoke, they were all attacking the absolute kill formation where Lin Sun was. The formation roared violently and kept rolling. It would be broken soon if nothing went wrong. At that time, in the eyes of Kun Bachyo and the others, a strong killing intent flashed. At that time, this kid would die without a doubt. As for the formation that protected the camp of Linshur, it was not taken seriously by Kun Bachyo and the others. After killing Lin Sun with their strength, they could easily destroy it and destroy it. However, Lin Sun snapped his fingers and said, "Old bastard, you have a good eye. You guessed it right. Look again." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and pointed. Kun Bachyo and the others were stunned and almost cursed in their hearts. There really was more? Soundlessly, in a place extremely far away, a formation energy that was like a rain of immortal light surged out, forming a vast misty formation. The gray mist lingered in the air. A series of dull thuds could be heard in the surrounding area. Groups of experts widened their eyes and fell to the ground. Their bodies were perfectly fine, but their souls had already been erased. This was the killing formation of soul destruction. The mist could not be dispelled at all. Covered the whole world. All the experts who were shrouded in it struggled to no avail. They fell to the ground in shock and fear. The strange and horrifying scene caused countless sharp cries to resound in the surroundings. "Isn't it wonderful?" Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and looked at Kun Bachyo and the others with cold eyes. "For this day, I have prepared for nearly half a year and devoted a lot of effort. Even my own cultivation has been delayed a lot. Now it seems that these efforts are worth it." The indifferent voice drifted, making the faces of Kun Bachyo and the others gloomy. They really didn't expect that Lin Sun's formation was so closely linked, and all of them were so powerful and lethal. Immediately, a group of top sages could not sit still and rushed to the killing formation of soul destruction in the distance. The situation in front of him instantly became clear. The killing formation of soul destruction, killing formation of soul destruction, killing formation of soul destruction, restrained a group of top sages respectively. Among them, Lin Sun's killing formation of soul destruction had the most top sages. Although part of the army of the seven regions was slaughtered, there were 210,000 people after all. The casualties were less than 1/10. They were constantly attacking the 8 defenses formation that was like the kingdom of the god. However, it had not worked yet. At least for the time being, the experts of the ancient desolation realm in the temporary camp were safe. This made Xiaohao and Ruo Wu involuntarily recall that before the war, Lin Sun had said that he would fight the enemy alone. At that time, everyone thought he was crazy. But now it seemed that all the situations seemed to be coming true. Childish, as long as you die, everything will be solved naturally. Suddenly, someone spoke in a cold voice that shook the heavens and the earth. "Everyone, attack with all your strength and kill this man." Kun Bachyo roared. In their eyes, the killing formation of soul destruction was about to be destroyed. But at this moment, Lin Sun suddenly let out a long laugh. His bearing was disdainful and majestic. "It's too late. Do you think I was talking nonsense with you just now? I was just waiting for an opportunity. Now the opportunity is here." Swish. Lin Sun, who had not made a move, waved his sleeve, and the remaining 12 holy treasures that had been refined into formation plates were divided into 3 groups and whistled in 3 directions. Boom. First was the Earth Annihilation Formation. With the 3 formation plates, its power was completely activated. Within the formation, it was like an ocean of sword chi. The dense sword chi was like a stormy sea, slashing the sky above and the nine nether below. It spread in all directions with a murderous aura. After that, a change occurred within the Godbreak Slaughter formation along with this. Dazzling and gorgeous thunderstorms surged as numerous seemingly ethereal images of the lightning Tao actually surged into appearance, and they were like lightning spirits and gods of lightning of legend. Then, the killing formation of soul destruction also changed. The fog was like a sea of clouds that covered the sky and the earth. In the gray color, a strange rain of light flickered. In the end, the absolute heaven slaughter formation that was originally on the verge of collapse also suddenly underwent a transformation amidst a world-shaking rumble. If it was said that there was a starry sky with thousands of stars rotating before, now the killing formation of soul destruction was a sea of stars, in which there were bright rivers of stars surging. A series of changes were completed in one go. At the same time, the formation of four extremes resonated with each other and merged into one, covering the surrounding area of 100 miles. It was also at this time that the formation of four extremes and 8 defenses was completely presented to the world. If one looked down from the sky, one would notice that merely the energy of restrictions emanated by this grand formation had stretched to an area of 1,500 kilometers, and it conformed with the heavens and the earth to form a great imposing aura of the heavens and the earth are united. It seemed that fighting against it was fighting against the world. This was the true face of the formation of four extremes and 8 defenses, which took Lin Sun nearly half a year to set up with the cyclic stars formation as the foundation. Oh no! What kind of holy prohibition is this? Damn it, I'm trapped, I can't move. It's not working underground either. There's a dense power of prohibition. At this moment, Kun Ba Chio and other top sages all changed their faces and felt a little bad. At this moment, they seemed to be in a boundless sea of stars and had lost all contact with the outside world. At the same time, in other areas, groups of top sages were trapped in other killing formations, and they also felt that something was wrong. This was the real, no way to heaven, no way to hell. If they couldn't break the formation, the consequences would be unimaginable. As for the hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the 7 regions, they were also trapped. They only felt that their eyes were blurred, and the scenery in front of them had completely changed. They couldn't find a way out, let alone continue to attack the temporary camp. Looking around, there was a boundless sea of stars, a world of sword chi like an ocean, a kingdom of thunder with raging thunderstorms, and a land of nothingness filled with mist. All the invading enemies had fallen into the trap at this moment. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back, and a cold light flashed in his deep eyes. The real killing began from this moment. Chapter 1568. Heaven and earth shook, and all things lost their color. The 4 ultimate 8 defense formation was operating at full power, releasing a restriction wave that swept across the universe. Swoosh! Lin Sun rose into the air, and every detail of the operation of the formation was presented in his mind. Now that the enemies had entered the trap, the slaughter began. Boom! In the formation, stars danced wildly, thunder and lightning raged, sword chi swept across the sea, and gray mist spread. The first to suffer was the army of the 7 regions. Rumble! Stars swept across, and each was like a divine mountain, crushing the universe. Any enemy that was touched by it would instantly explode into pieces, fresh blood splashing high into the air. When the Milky Way danced in the air, it was like the hand of the heavens waving the whip of heaven's punishment. Every lash of the whip could take away hundreds of lives. Let's go together and block it. Kun Ba Chio and other top saints were also trapped in the star sea world derived from the heavenly slaying formation. Seeing such a bloody scene, their eyes turned red, and their hair stood on end as they attacked with all their strength. Crack! Crack! Sharp and dazzling electric arcs were mixed in the violent thunder, like a raging storm, roaring between heaven and earth. Every attack was like a peerless thunder tribulation. If it was light, the skin and flesh would be torn open, and if it was heavy, the soul would be destroyed, leaving only the bones and corpses. Even the existences at the true saint level were seriously injured under the violent killing of the thunder and lightning arcs. If there were no accidents, they would die sooner or later. Quick, block it! In the thunder and lightning world derived from the god-slaying formation, there were also top saints who attacked angrily, unable to tolerate such a massacre happening in front of them. Clang! 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 And in the sea of sword chi derived from the earth-killing formation, countless dense sword chi flashed with peerless sharpness, whistling and shooting. Just the sound of the sword was enough to shake the mind and make people tremble. And the experts who were cut by the sword chi were all dissected, their broken limbs flying everywhere, and blood spilling everywhere. It was a shocking scene. The group of peerless sages was enraged. They attacked ferociously. Compared to this, the world of mist formed by the spirit extinguisher slaughter formation was undoubtedly the strangest and most terrifying. The dusky mist filled the air, and everywhere it passed, corpses lay on the ground. Every single corpse was completely intact. Even his expression was clearly visible, and it was filled with terror, astonishment, helplessness, and despair. Even the peerless sages felt chills down their spines. Such a killing array was only effective in the soul, making it impossible to defend against. They used all their strength to barely resist, but it was impossible for them to escape in a short period of time. What kind of formation is this? Why is it so terrifying? No! Ancestor, save me! Ancestor, save me! Within the four absolute slaughter formation, shrill cries, sharp cries, furious roars, and howls sounded out without end, and they were mixed with boundless blood. There were more than 200,000 soldiers in the army. Almost all of them were at the longevity tribulation realm, and many true sages. However, they were like trapped beasts in a desperate situation. They were panic-stricken, overwhelmed, and terrified. All of their expressions changed, and they were in complete disorder. Lin Sun's expression was cold, and his black eyes were indifferent. When he was in the blood demon realm, he was able to kill more than a dozen peerless sages by himself. However, he chose to stop in front of the city of Tao Protectors. Why? The reason was that the city of Tao Protectors was covered with extremely powerful and terrifying restrictive power. Even with his confidence, he didn't dare to break into it rashly. But now, he had spent nearly half a year to set up the 4 absolute 8 defense formation here. Its power was absolutely not inferior to that of the restrictive formation covering the city of Tao Protectors in the blood demon realm. It was also because of this that Lin Sun dared to say that he could fight against all enemies by himself at the beginning of the battle. In the 8 defense formation, Ruowu, Xiao Hao, and tens of thousands of experts of the ancient desolation realm witnessed this tragic scene. Everyone's eyes and mouths were wide open, and their eyebrows were full of shock. The torrential rain of blood, the fallen corpses, and the shrill and furious screams outlined a bloody picture that was like hell. So what if they were true sages? Trapped in it, they could only be killed, and they would also die in a miserable state. So what if they were peerless sages? Trapped in it, they could only struggle to hold on. As for the densely packed experts in the immortality tribulation realm, they were even more miserable. They were simply harvested in batches like weeds. Xiao Hao and Ruowu looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. This was the formation that Lin Sun had set up. It was something he'd spent almost half a year of painstaking effort to build, and it was only today that it revealed its murderous might that could cover the heavens and the earth and sweep through an army of 10,000. However, even they didn't expect that such a large-scale restrictive formation could be so terrifying. The other experts of the ancient desolation realm were already excited and shocked. They all looked dull, and their bodies were slightly trembling because of excitement. In the past, they could only hide here and there like prey and swallow their anger. They didn't know how aggrieved they had been. The foreign enemies of the 8 regions had wantonly ravaged, trampled, and killed them. Until now, no one knew how many experts of the ancient Desolation realm had been buried on the battlefield. Moreover, it was unknown how many talented geniuses had suffered grievances, and how many beautiful women had been humiliated and tortured to death. Blood and tears, hatred and hatred, intertwined in everyone's heart. Therefore, when they heard that Lin Sun wanted to rebuild the city of Tao Protectors, they desperately came from all directions, because they had been holding back their anger. However, the strength of the foreign enemies of the 8 regions was still beyond their expectations. It made them feel frightened, nervous, and even desperate. But now all of that was over. Lin Sun operated the big formation alone and turned the tide with one hand. In the previous 2 battles of the 9 regions, the city of Tao Protectors of the ancient Desolation realm was destroyed. I don't know how many sages of the realm of Tao Protectors were slaughtered here. Can we avenge ourselves this time? Someone clenched his fists and murmured. Yes, we definitely can. Someone stared at Lin Sun's tall figure in the distant sky. His expression was fanatical and firm, and his tone was unquestionable. Although the figure was alone and still young, he already had an invincible demeanor. He was as dazzling as the sun in the sky. As long as he was here, they would have a chance to avenge themselves. This is just a part of the foreign enemies. The real main forces of the 8 regions are still here. The battle of the 9 regions battlefield is destined to continue in the future. Someone said in a low voice, "But no matter what, we have hope this time." Yes, hope, even laughing at the heavens. Yechen, Ji Xingyao, Mi Hengzhen, Yu Jiaming, and the others showed a look of longing. In the past, they only thought about how to survive and did not dare to think about revenge. But now it was different. They really saw hope. It's still not enough. In the void, Lin Sun did not relax at all. He had been paying attention to all the movements in the 4 lore-killing formation. Restricted by the power of the rules of the 9 regions battlefield, the power of the 4 lore-killing formation was also suppressed to a certain extent. Otherwise, according to Lin Sun's deduction, it should not be a problem to kill a group of top sages, let alone a top sage. Just like at this moment, the top sages trapped in the formation seemed to be in a mess, but they were not really injured. If this continued for a long time, the power of the spiritual veins under the formation would be exhausted, and the consequences would be terrible. Lin Sun keenly noticed that in the heavenly killing formation, Kuan Ba Chiu and the other top sages had begun to walk out of passivity and began to take the initiative to break the formation. The reason was very simple. Among the 70 top sages, there were 33 people gathered around Kuan Ba Chiu alone. The other 37 people were trapped in 3 different killing formations. The power of more than 30 top sages attacking at the same time was naturally different. It was even faintly shaking the heavenly killing formation. Moreover, the army of the 7 regions scattered in the heavenly killing formation were all kept in the treasures of Kuan Ba Chiu and the others, thus avoiding the fate of being killed. Can we break the formation like this in the future? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold and revealed a touch of killing intent. It was time for him to attack. Swoosh! The next moment, his figure disappeared into thin air. Quick, go all out and break this formation! Kuan Ba Chiu roared with a cold expression. The terrifying formation set up by Lin Sun had indeed caught them off guard. In less than 15 minutes, there were already many casualties. But those who died were not sages, and the top sages did not suffer, so Kuan Ba Chiu did not lose his mind because of this. But deep in his heart, his killing intent was boiling and he was extremely furious. This time, the 7 regions had joined forces and sent out a mighty army with 70 top sages, but they suffered such a great loss in front of the incomparably weak ancient Desolation. It was a great shame. Even if they won this battle, they were destined to be disgraced when they returned to their respective camps. They would look very embarrassing and be ridiculed by others. Kill! break this formation and slaughter those two-legged sheep. This time, I will grind their bones and scatter their souls." The other top sages were also livid and extremely furious. They all activated their secret methods and fought fiercely with the power of the formation like dominators. Moreover, they had already gained the upper hand. But at this moment, Lin Sun's figure appeared out of thin air. With a step, he had already arrived in front of a top sage and raised his fist to attack. Boom! Lin Sun's punch, which combined the power of qi refining, body refining, and soul connecting, swept out with an unstoppable momentum. It was extremely fast and overbearing. It was just a fist, but it gave people the feeling that it was like a murderous ancient mountain. The fist intent was divine. Bang! Unsurprisingly, as soon as the top sage reacted, his defense was smashed by the punch. Even the layer of armor covering his chest was smashed, and his whole body exploded in the void. His soul core didn't even have the chance to escape from his body before it was forcefully shattered by the force of the fist that was like a tsunami. A top sage was killed by a punch. This was also the first top sage to be killed since the start of the war, which immediately shocked everyone. Chapter 1569. In the 8 defense formation. Ruo Wu and Xiao Hao were both shocked. Lin Sun's punch was clean and decisive. It was a one-hit kill. That kind of power amazed them. As for the other overmatches in the ancient Desolation territory, they were all dumbfounded and swallowed hard. One punch. Killing a peerless saint? That was too cruel. In their eyes, a peerless saint was like a dominator who could easily kill any true saint. But how could he be so weak in Lin Sun's hands? This was also the first time they saw Lin Sun's real combat power. The power of the 8 defense formation was a Taoist forbidden formation after all. It borrowed the power of heaven and earth, which was completely different from one's own combat power. What they didn't know was that when Lin Sun was in the God refining forest, Lin Sun was able to reverse the situation and kill all the enemies under the siege of 7 top sages, including Lo, Shuexiu, and the others, even though he hadn't comprehended the method of 3-way in 1. Not to mention now, the combination of the 3 made Lin Sun's combat power reach an unimaginable height in the Peerless Saint realm. In the Sky Defense formation, Kuan Ba Qiu and other Peerless Saints were shocked and their faces changed. Lin Sun's sudden attack and killing one of their companions made them feel surprised and frightened. The bloody scene was too shocking. But soon, they all showed ecstasy. They were worried that they couldn't kill this little bastard, but he dared to appear in the formation. Don't be careless. This boy killed many peerless saints in the Blood Demon territory. His combat power is extraordinary. If we fight, we must go all out. Some people were extremely calm and reminded them by voice transmission. Kuan Ba Qiu and others' eyes flickered. They certainly knew Lin Sun's past achievements, so they wouldn't neglect him at this time. If you think you can change the situation by relying on the advantage of numbers, you're wrong. Lin Sun said calmly with cold eyes. The Sky Defense formation was under his control, so its power couldn't kill him. Conversely, even though Kuan Ba Qiu and the others had the advantage of numbers, they were suffering the attacks of the Grand Formation at all times, and it imperceptibly acted as a form of restraint. It could be said that Lin Sun had the geographical advantage in this formation. Kill! Kuan Ba Qiu shouted. He didn't waste any words, nor did he have the time to waste any words. The longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous their situation would be. As peerless sages who had been fighting for a long time, they certainly understood how great Lin's advantage was in this killing formation. And Lin Sun's own combat power was not to be underestimated. Rumble! In an instant, the 32 peerless sages split up a portion of their strength to attack while fighting against the power of the formation. No one held back. Saint artifacts soared into the sky while Tao techniques whistled through the air, and this world that seemed like an ocean of stars was filled with signs of unrest, chaos, and destruction. Normally speaking, So long as it was an expert that had stepped foot into the Saint realm, then it would cultivate in all three paths towards the Tao. For these peak sages who came from other realms, there were powerful people who cultivated three different paths of Tao before they became sages. Because in the other domains, there was no Tao tribulation that could stop them. However, even if it was in the other territories, there were still very few existences that were capable of ascending to the peak of all three paths when they attained the Saint realm, and they were practically existences that were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Kuan Ba Chiu and the others were not such characters, but they also cultivated in different paths of Tao. It was just that not all of them could set foot on the peak. Therefore, even if they had to fight against the power of the formation at the same time, their combat power was still extremely strong, far beyond that of ordinary true sages. Unfortunately, even if they attacked with all their strength, it would be difficult for them to pose a threat to Lin Sun, not to mention the current situation. Rumble! The battle broke out. In the killing formation, a bright red sword that seemed to be made of blood appeared in Lin Sun's palm. As the sword swept out, a river of blood vaguely appeared on the two-finger-wide body of the sword. There were corpses of gods and demons floating in the river, burying ancient corpses. The scene was terrifying, as if it could bury everything. Bang! A silver halberd was directly cut in half, as easy as a sword cutting tofu. In the exclamation, the dazzling blood-colored sword chi flowed and cut off the head of a peerless sage who was holding a silver halberd. Yuan Killer Sword! Suddenly, an old monster roared, revealing an incomparably fearful expression. Lin Sun couldn't help but be a little surprised. The enemies of the Seven Territories also knew about Yuan Killer Sword? In the ancient Desolation realm, there had always been an extremely mysterious legend. In the beginning of the ancient times, there was an orthodoxy called Blood Abyss sect. In this orthodoxy there were two peerless murderous weapons. One was named Yuan Killer, born in the Blood Abyss River. The other was named Avicii, born in the Blood Abyss Prison. These two treasures were both congenital weapons. They killed people without causing any karma, which was enough to make the sages in the world extremely afraid. The blood sword in Lin Sun's hand was the murderous weapon Yuan Killer, which was the spoils of war from Ming Child. Inside the sword, its power was heavily sealed. Otherwise, Ming Child wouldn't be able to use this sword in the domain of absolute nightmare. It was only after Lin Sun became a sage that he unsealed the sword one by one, revealing its true power. "Who is Mingi Sword Emperor to you?" someone exclaimed. "Damn it, it's this murderous sword. Didn't they say that this sword has disappeared from the world?" Some people were furious. Lin Sun couldn't help frowning at their fierce reactions. Mingi Sword Emperor? Could it be that this Yuan Killer Sword had caused great damage to the foreign enemies of the 8 regions, which they dared not forget until now? "It seems that I have to keep one alive and interrogate him," Lin Sun was thinking, but his movements were not slow. The Yuan Killer Sword in his hand was as red as blood, and the sound of the sword was impassioned. There was an unparalleled and unstoppable murderous spirit in it. Puff! Before long, a sage couldn't dodge in time and was cut open by the sword. He roared unwillingly, "This is definitely the Yuan Killer Sword." Boom! Soon, another sage was killed, but his body was swept away by the star river derived from the heavenly slaying formation, and his body was ground to pieces. Then, he was killed by Lin Sun's sword without hesitation. In the battle, Lin Sun was also keenly aware that the Yuan Killer Sword in his hand was full of terrible bloody and ferocious spirit. It was as if it was psychic, with a thirst for killing sages. As the sages were killed one after another, the body of the sword became more and more scarlet, with a kind of demonic bloodthirsty spirit. The violent, bloody and ferocious sword chi even had an impact on Lin Sun's mind. However, Lin Sun's state of mind was so strong that he could not be affected. Even so, Lin Sun was still secretly shocked. This sword was indeed a murderous weapon full of mystery. Ordinary holy treasures could not resist its sharpness at all and would be cut into pieces. Moreover, its power was also so powerful that it made people's hearts palpitate. The more it was stained with blood, the more ferocious it was. In just a moment, 5 more sages were killed. All of them were cut open by the Yuan killer sword, and their blood splashed everywhere. They died tragically. The Yuan killer sword became more and more scarlet and demonic, and the sound of the sword was like a tide, surging endlessly. Damn it, this sword is really as powerful as the legend says. The more sages it kills, the more powerful it will be. This is the real sword of slaughter. It is said that there is a river of blood flowing in this sword. The more blood this sword drinks, the more vast, surging and turbulent the blood river will be, making the power of this sword more and more terrible. Damn it! In the first battle of the 9 regions, countless sages of our clan were killed by the Sword Emperor with this sword. At that time, the Sword Emperor was just a young man who had just stepped into the Saint Realm. Kun Ba Chio and other top sages looked gloomy and livid, and each of them had a look of fear on their faces. At this time, their state of mind was shaken. In this slaughter formation of heaven, they were already in a disadvantageous position, and Lin Sun's strength was even more beyond their expectations. Especially the Yuan killer sword, how could they not have heard of its fierce name? In the first battle of the 9 regions, the Sword Emperor with the Yuan killer sword and the Avicii sword defeated the sages of the 8 regions. Although the 8 regions won the battle of the 9 regions in the end, this matter was still regarded as a great shame and hatred by the 8 regions. Now the Yuan killer sword reappeared in the world. Kill! Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of all this. His expression was cold, and his black eyes were like lightning. He held the sword and slaughtered, sweeping through the formation with matchless valor and invincibility. In the following time, top sages fell one after another in the 8 defense formation. Ruowu, Xiao Hao, and the others were still calm. They knew that the sword in Lin Sun's hand was the one he took from Mingzi. But to the other powerhouses of the ancient Desolation realm, Lin Sun was simply a peerless sword demon who was born to kill. Wherever the bloody sword energy passed, it killed sages and drank their blood. It was extremely fierce. You still dare to call yourself sword demon? Laughing at the heavens couldn't help but glance at Yi Chen. Yi Chen's lips twitched. It's just a title. Why not give it to Lin Sun? That's more than 30 top sages. But they were killed by Lin Sun one by one like chickens and dogs. Who can tell me if this is an illusion or not? A woman said with a dazed expression. No. Many people began to laugh loudly. Their faces were filled with excitement and excitement. Everything in front of them was indeed unreal, like a dream. It was full of inconceivable and shocking. But everyone knew that this was not a dream. The 7 regions' army came aggressively and boasted that they would destroy this place and kill all the powerhouses of the ancient Desolation realm. But now, weren't they still trapped in the Grand Formation and utterly defeated? Isn't it a little bad for us to stay here and watch? Someone couldn't help but say. For a moment, everyone sighed. The key was, who could help Lin Sun in such a battle? It was not that they didn't want to, but they couldn't. Didn't they see that even Ruowu and Xiao Hao, the 2 leaders who had become sages, could only watch from afar? In the heavenly slaughter formation. It was a desperate and bloody atmosphere. In less than a quarter of an hour, more than half of the top figures had been killed, and their blood spilled on the spot. Chapter 1570. In the heavenly slaying formation, the Milky Way flowed and the huge stars crushed the void. Divine light rumbled, dazzling and astonishing. Puff! A glaring sword radiance flashed, and another peak-level saint was killed. His head was chopped off, and his corpse was crushed by a river of stars, exploding inch by inch. There were only 6 peerless saints left in the field. At this moment, Kun Ba Chio truly felt fear. Blue veins bulged on his forehead, making him look extremely ferocious. In less than 15 minutes, only 6 of the 33 peerless saints were left. This was too terrifying. No matter how he racked his brains, Koinbachyo could not imagine that all of them would be trapped by a grand formation in this expedition. He didn't expect that Lin Sun's combat power was even stronger than the rumors. "Little bastard, I'll fight you to the death." Suddenly, a roar filled with endless anger resounded. Koinbachyo looked up and saw one of his companions. His body seemed to be burning as he risked his life to kill Lin Sun. Had he been driven mad? Koinbachyo was shocked. Puff. It turned out that risking his life was futile. With a flash of the Yuan killer sword, this peerless saint was cut in half at the waist. Glaring scarlet blood splashed everywhere, causing Koinbachyo's entire body to tremble. Only 5 people were left. On the other hand, Lin Sun's momentum was like that of a demon. He held the blood sword and killed saints, drinking their blood. How could this be? Koinbachyo couldn't accept it. This time, they sent 70 peerless saints and more than 200,000 soldiers. How powerful was their momentum! But now, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Puff. While Koinbachyo was in a state of agitation and his fighting spirit was shaken, another peerless saint was killed. His forehead was pierced and his skull exploded. He screamed before he died. That was a peerless saint. But in Lin Sun's hands, it was as easy as cutting melons and vegetables. Not to mention Koinbachyo, even the experts of the ancient Desolation realm, who were watching from the 8 defense formation, were dumbfounded and gasped. How powerful was Lin Sun now? This question also troubled Koinbachyo. He couldn't believe that there was such a heaven-defying existence in the peerless saint realm. Puff, puff, puff. In the following time, peerless saints were killed one after another. Their blood splashed, and the Yuan killer sword in Lin Sun's hand became more and more red and demonic. That sword cry was like a cheer thirsting for blood. On the other hand, the sky above the temporary camp had long since been covered in a thick layer of blood red, and wave after wave of the mourning of saints resounded through the heavens and the earth. It was enough to make one tremble with fear. Clang! Within the grand formation, the tip of the sword was like blood as it pressed against Koinbachyo's throat, causing his entire body to tremble. His originally wavering fighting spirit had completely collapsed, and his entire body was drowned by terror. "I said before that I would let you die a horrible death. If I let you die so easily now, it would be too easy on you." Lin Sun's dark eyes were cold as he looked at Koinbachyo. The Yuan killer sword in his hand was flowing with a surging and vast bloody Styx river, which seemed to be about to swallow Koinbachyo. Koinbachyo's face turned ashen as he gnashed his teeth. "You think you can win just like that? When the 8 despairs of Cyan Netherworld realize your threat, they will definitely launch an all-out attack and wipe out all of you 2-legged sheep in the realm of ancient desolation." Puff! The Yuan killer sword suddenly pierced into Koinbachyo's chest. He let out a painful groan and his face was pale. His eyes were filled with hatred, despair, and unwillingness. However, Lin Sun did not kill him immediately. Instead, he grabbed his neck and flashed out of the killing formation of heavens. "Next, I will let you see with your own eyes what is called blood for blood." Lin Sun's eyes were cold. As he spoke, he brought Koinbachyo into the killing formation. In the ancient times, there was a sage who once said that killing one was a sin, killing 10,000 was a hero, and killing 9 million was a hero among heroes. The immortal cause of 1,000 years was all in killing the enemy. It was better to let the enemy gnash their teeth in hatred than to let no one scold my name. Today, Lin Sun would not stop until he killed all his enemies. After a quarter of an hour, in the killing formation, a total of 12 peerless saints were killed. Blood rained down. Koinbachyo witnessed this and was so angry that he coughed up blood. Lin Sun did not stop and brought Koinbachyo into the killing formation of gods. Witnessing all this, Ruowu, Xiao Hao, and other experts of the realm of ancient desolation were all excited and could not control themselves. Some of them even had tears in their eyes. In the 9 regions battlefield, since the first battle of the 9 regions, when had the realm of ancient desolation ever been so proud? No. After a quarter of an hour, in the killing formation of gods, Lin soon killed 13 opponents like a hot knife through butter. His sword was dripping with blood, and he was invincible without any mercy. Kuan Ba Chio's expression was numb like a walking corpse. He had completely collapsed. There was only one thought in his mind: it was all over. After an hour, as Lin Sun killed the last peerless saint, Kuan Ba Chio, who had been by Lin Sun's side, did not react at all. His expression was lifeless, his eyes empty, and his body stiff. He was like a puppet without a soul, lifeless and lifeless. It's over. After a long time, he seemed to regain a trace of consciousness. However, there was no longer any emotion in his heart. His heart was dead. That was probably it. Of the 70 peerless saints, he was the only one left alive. As for the 200,000-strong army from the 7 regions, they had already suffered heavy casualties in the previous battle. Later on, some peerless sages kept their treasures. But now, these treasures had fallen into Lin Sun's hands. It could be said that the life and death of the army of the 7 regions were completely in Lin Sun's hands. The entire army was annihilated, Kuan Ba Chio murmured, his voice also emotionless. Beside him, Lin Sun's eyes were deep. He could see that Kuan Ba Chio's state of mind had collapsed. Even if he did not attack, Kuan Ba Chio would die. Kuan Ba Chio seemed to be aware of this as well. He raised his head with difficulty and looked at Lin Sun. A touch of extreme hatred emerged in his originally empty eyes. He enunciated word by word, as if his voice was squeezed out of his chest. "You will be avenged." Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, his body fell to the ground. His vitality disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then he died. Lin Sun retracted his gaze and did not look at the cold corpse again. If there was revenge, it should be the realm of ancient desolation taking revenge on the foreign enemies of the 8 regions. At this point, there were no more enemies in the 4 killing formations of sky severing, earth punishing, god destroying, and spirit exterminating. All the top sages had been killed. The army of the 7 regions that had been kept in the treasures were also prisoners. Their lives were no longer in Lin Sun's hands. In the 8 defense formation, everyone in the realm of ancient desolation was shocked speechless. In the sky, blood light surged, and the mourning sound of sages dying resounded. Between heaven and earth, the 4 killing formations had fallen into silence. Just like that, they won? Even Ruowu and Xiaohao were in a trance and remained silent for a long time. Heaven and earth were shrouded in a shocking atmosphere. 70 top sages and more than 200,000 soldiers were trapped in the formation and were all annihilated. And the person who did all this was just Lin Sun alone. With his own strength, he suppressed all the enemies. Before, when Lin Sun said this, no one dared to believe it. They all felt that it was crazy. But now, who could not believe it? In the silent atmosphere, Lin Sun's figure walked out of the formation. His moon-white clothes were still as spotless as before. His aura was also as ethereal as before, like an immortal. However, when his figure appeared and stood alone in the void, he immediately became the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone was shocked and in a trance. It seemed that they couldn't believe that such a young man had just swept away thousands of soldiers. "Everyone, how do you feel about waiting and seeing?" Above the void, Lin Sun slightly raised the corner of his mouth with a smile, and his voice resounded through the world. His words broke the shocked silence in the field. Then, the sound waves went straight to the sky like a pot exploding. He won! He really won! Brother Lin can cover the sky with one hand in this battle. He can be called invincible. Great, it's so great. All kinds of emotions that everyone had suppressed in their hearts burst out at this moment. Men and women, regardless of their cultivation, were all cheering and laughing. Their faces were full of excitement and shock. Some people couldn't help crying. They had been shrouded in humiliation and hatred for too long. They had been trampled and despised by the enemy for too long. Today, they finally had the day to stand up and hold their heads high. How could the strong people in the ancient desolation realm not be excited? The huge camp was completely boiling at this moment. Xiaohao and Ruowu looked at each other and laughed with mixed feelings. Regardless of the final result of the battle between the 9 regions, this battle alone was enough to make Lin Sun's name recorded in history and become an indelible legend in the ancient desolation realm. "Look, little Tian, this is our master, our master!" Little Silver crossed his arms in front of his chest, and his handsome little face was full of pride. On his shoulder, the sky-splitting butterfly fluttered its wings and seemed to be very excited. Above the void, Lin Sun was also infected by all this. Thinking of his efforts in the past 6 months, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Everything was worth it. However, this still didn't achieve one of Lin's goals today. Boom! His figure flashed and stood in the sky. With a wave of his sleeve, the whole 4 extremes and 8 defenses formation suddenly started. Visible to the naked eye, the corpses and blood piled up in the formation were controlled by the power of the restriction, covering the bricks and stones within 100 miles. What? In the camp, everyone was stunned and attracted their eyes. Brother Lin is going to build a city. He must be building a city. Suddenly, everyone in the camp came to their senses. 3 months ago, Lin Sun had said that he would build a guardian city for the ancient desolation realm today. Killing the enemies was just to collect materials for building the city. For a moment, everyone looked at Lin Sun with a touch of passion in their eyes. Many people held their breath and clenched their fists secretly. From today on, the ancient desolation realm would finally have a guardian city that could shelter them from the wind and rain and defend against the enemies outside. They didn't dare to think about it before. Chapter 1571. In the sky, the bloody light was thick, and the sound of Saint Death was still ringing. High in the sky, as Lin Sun waved his sleeves, huge golden bricks piled up in the area within a radius of 100 miles around the temporary camp, emitting magnificent Taoist patterns. Every single one of these bricks was 3 m long, 1 m thick, and smooth like glass. Moreover, they were refined from sky crystal goldzan and were suffused with a unique and brilliant golden radiance. On each brick, Lin Sun had already engraved Taoist patterns. At this time, with the operation of the formation of 4 imperials and 8 extremes, the piled-up golden mountains echoed with the formation. Soon after, the corpses and blood of those who had lost their lives in the formation were all gathered together. Under the control of the formation's power, they covered every golden mountain. For a time, the golden mountains were all piled up with bones and soaked with blood. Boom! An hour later, as Lin Sun controlled the power of the formation, the golden mountains and countless huge golden bricks within 100 miles all produced a strange roar. "Rise!" Lin Sun spat out a word. Suddenly, the golden bricks were piled up neatly. All the strongmen in the camp couldn't help holding their breath, showing shock and fascination. In their sight, golden walls bathed in blood rose from the ground at a speed visible to the naked eye. Bang, bang, bang! When the golden bricks were piled up, the dull sound they emitted was like the sound of beans being stir-fried, and it resounded continuously. High in the sky, Lin Sun looked focused. From time to time, he waved his fingers to control and use the whole formation precisely and delicately. At the beginning of setting up the formation, Lin Sun had already finalized every detail, such as the position of each golden mountain, the Taoist patterns engraved on each brick, and how to perfectly fit the whole formation when building the city. All these problems had been deduced by Lin Sun countless times in the past 6 months, and finally all the details of building the city were determined. Lin Sun's intention was very simple. He wanted to build an immortal city for the ancient desolation realm to shelter it from the wind and rain and defend it against the enemies. Even if there was another battle between the 9 regions in the future, this city could be immortal forever. At this moment, he was merely putting the city of Tao protectors into practice. 70 peerless saints, 210,000 soldiers from the 7 realms, plus the corpses and blood of the enemies collected before, have all become materials in Lin Sun's hands. Ruo Wu was in a trance. If those enemies knew of this, they would definitely fly into a rage. I suspect that Lin Sun had already considered everything that would happen today when he set up the formation half a year ago. How crazy is it to build the city of Tao protection in the ancient desolation realm with the enemy's flesh and blood? But he managed to do it. Xiaohao sighed. Ruo Wu's starry eyes were unreal. She said in a low voice, "In fact, we should have known that behind Lin Sun's seemingly bold and amazing actions, there is actually complete preparation and planning. It's just that it's hard for ordinary people to understand his painstaking efforts. Only those who can do what others can't do can be a great hero. Lin Sun is a real talent. I can't help but admire him." Xiaohao touched his nose with a complicated look in his eyes. He had never given up the idea of competing with Lin Sun. But after being in contact with Lin Sun for a long time and seeing so many amazing things that happened to Lin Sun, even he couldn't help but doubt whether it was too hard for him to compete with such a monster. "The only thing I'm worried about is that after this battle, the enemies of the 8 realms will definitely see Lin Sun as a threat. In the future, I don't know how many dangers will befall him," Ruo Wu said in a low voice. "In this battle, Lin Sun trapped and killed the army of the 7 realms by himself and wiped out all the enemies. Such a record was bound to be unconcealable. How would the enemies of the 8 realms react when they learned of this? So we have to hurry up. If we want to compete with the enemies of the 8 realms, it's not enough to rely on Lin Sun alone. Only when there are more peerless saints in the ancient desolation realm can we have the foundation to compete in the 9-realm battlefield." Xiaohao's eyes were firm. Among the enemies of the 8 realms, there were as many peerless saints as there were clouds in the sky. Although the 7 territories' armies had been completely annihilated today, each territory had only lost 10 peerless sages and 30,000 soldiers. It should be noted that when Lin Sun was in the Blood Demon realm, he had killed 30 peerless saints and countless strong practitioners of the Blood Demon ancient region. Compared with this, it could be seen that although the casualties this time were great, it was not a big loss for the 7 realms. After this battle, the enemies of the 8 realms were bound to take the strength of the ancient desolation realm seriously again. In the future, they would gather more powerful forces to suppress and encircle the forces of the ancient desolation realm. You're right. What our ancient desolation realm lacks most now is the number of peerless saints, Ruo Wu said in a low voice. In about half a year, the origin magnetic secret realm, which contains the opportunity to become a saint, will come. Lin Sun once said that at that time, he would help the strong practitioners of the ancient desolation realm to fight for the opportunity to become a saint. The origin magnetic secret realm? Xiaohao sighed. There is still half a year left. I hope there won't be too many twists and turns. In the distance, Lin Sun had been focusing on building the city and completely forgot himself. In the northernmost realm, on Mount Fuyaoxi, an enormous koan that was an entire 30 kilometers long was stirring up winds and waves, and the waves it gave off even shattered space and transformed into terrifying vortexes of water that charged into the sky, causing the layer of clouds to shatter. Swish! Not long after, the koan suddenly turned into the appearance of a young man dressed in a wide-sleeved black robe. His face was like jade, and his eyes were like a pair of whirlpools, bursting out frightening divine light. With a flash, he arrived in front of an island palace. Congratulations, young master, you have touched the threshold of creating your own method. An old monster of the Kuan clan greeted him with a respectful look. I have only touched the threshold. There is still a long way to go. It is not worth making a fuss. Qin Xiaoyu sighed. Although he said so, there was a touch of unconcealable complacency between his eyebrows. In the 8 realms, it was not rare for peerless figures like him to set foot on the peak of the Saint realm. However, there were definitely very few people like him who could touch the threshold of the Saint creation method as soon as they set foot on the peak of the Saint realm. In the northern Darkstar ancient region, with his current battle strength, he could establish a sect and make those old monsters bow down to him. Amid the congratulatory voices, Qin Xiaoyu walked into the main hall and said as he walked, "This time, the ancient desolation region will definitely be defeated by the 7 realms' armies. The goal of killing ancient desolation first has been achieved. Next, it is time to consider the 8 realms competition." Speaking of this, he thought of something and could not help but sneer. I am sure that if the 8 realms compete for hegemony, Xueqingyi's blood demon ancient region will definitely be at a disadvantage. As soon as he said this, all the northern Darkstar ancient region experts in the main hall roared with laughter. In the current 9 realms battlefield, Xueqingyi and the blood demon ancient region behind her had already become the biggest laughing stock. They were ridiculed and looked down upon by the other realms. Swish! At this moment, a letter formed by a divine rainbow swept into the main hall. The operation to kill the 2-legged sheep of the ancient desolation region has ended? Not bad, not bad. It ended faster than I expected. Qin Xiaoyu's spirits lifted as he picked up the letter with a smile and placed it in front of him. Ha ha ha, this is only natural. A total of 70 peerless sages and an army of more than 200,000 could easily wipe out the ancient desolation region experts. Someone laughed. What about that little bastard called Lin Sun? He must be dead, right? I wonder if Xueqingyi will regret missing a chance to take revenge when she finds out about this. Someone else teased. However, everyone gradually realized that Qin Xiaoyu's reaction was a little strange. He stood there with one hand holding the letter. His eyes were straight, his face was stiff, and the smile on his lips had also frozen. It was as if he was possessed. What's wrong with the young master? Everyone was puzzled. Suddenly, the letter in Qin Xiaoyu's hand exploded. His face had already turned livid and extremely gloomy. His gaze was murderous as he gritted his teeth and said, "They were defeated just like that?" Everyone was taken aback. Defeated? Someone muttered, "Young master, are you saying that the ancient desolation region was defeated? Isn't that normal?" Bang! Qin Xiaoyu was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. He kicked the person away and slammed into the wall, causing blood to spurt out of his mouth and nose. Everyone was horrified. At this moment, Qin Xiaoyu's eyes were red and his hair was standing on end. His aura was simply too terrifying, like an enraged god. Soon, everyone understood the information recorded in the letter. Suddenly, the hall seemed to be in an uproar. Impossible! The army of the 7 regions was trapped and killed together, and no one survived? This news must be fake. It's fake. Damn it, how could this be? Every big shot's face was full of shock and anger. They were all flustered and exasperated, finding it hard to accept. That was a total of 70 peerless sages and an army of more than 200,000, but they were actually killed by Lin Sun alone? Who could believe it? Qin Xiaoyu didn't dare to believe it either. Previously, he was still thinking about how to carry out the 8 territories competition after the goal of destroying the ancient desolation region was achieved. Who would have thought that the reality was like a slap in the face? Investigate. You must find out the specific information for me. Qin Xiaoyu's face was grim as he shouted sternly. This time, he was the one who led the attack of the army of the 7 regions. He thought that it would be enough to easily wipe out the strong cultivators of the ancient desolation region. But the result was that the ancient desolation region destroyed the army of the 7 regions without losing a single soldier. This was such a huge blow that even Qin Xiaoyu couldn't accept it. A day later, when the exact news came and was repeatedly confirmed, Quan Xiaoyu was completely stunned and lost his mind. It was actually true. Not a single one of the army of the 7 regions survived. Is Lin Sun really that terrifying? Quan Xiaoyu's eyes were full of surging coldness. This fiasco was not a great loss to the northern underworld ancient territory. The point was that it was too humiliating. Thinking about it, the 7 regions had joined forces and sent out so many troops, but they were all wiped out by a single person. Such a fiasco had never happened even in the previous 9 territories competition. Chapter 1572. The Northern Underworld Ancient Territory was not the only one who received the news. The other camps, such as the Absolute Een Ancient Territory, the Heavenly Fire Ancient Territory, the Jili Ancient Territory, the Daluo Ancient Territory, and the East Mulberry Ancient Territory, also received the news. A bunch of trash. Qi Wushu was in seclusion when he received the news. He was fuming with anger and his killing intent erupted, causing countless big shots to keep quiet out of fear. What a disgrace! Zhu Yingkong sighed after a long time in the Absolute Een realm. Lin Sun is actually a Dao tattooist with extraordinary means? This is really unexpected. Jian Qingchen's expression was as calm as ever in the Daluo realm. But when he finished speaking, all the big shots felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. They were all anxious. He destroyed the army of the 7 territories by himself? That's impressive. Shi Pohei's voice was icy cold as he kicked the table before him over, causing the entire floor to be in a mess. Lai Qian from the Heavenly Fire Ancient Territory and Hua Hongxiao from the East Mulberry Ancient Territory were also enraged by the news. It was an unprecedented shame and humiliation for a barren, declining and weak territory to suffer a setback in the attack of the 7 territories and the annihilation of the whole army just because of a person like Lin Sun. For a time, the 7 camps were all shaken. This news caused an uproar. Is Lin Sun really that terrifying? He killed 70 peerless sages and destroyed an army of 210,000 soldiers? Many people's first reaction was that it was impossible. How could there be such a powerful figure in the ancient desolation realm? There were also people who were shocked. Such a crushing defeat is a disgrace to us. We must pay with our blood. More people were angry and felt indescribably humiliated. They didn't know who Lin Sun was before. It was only when the Blood Demon world suffered a heavy blow and many sages were killed and the city of Dao Protectors was besieged by a single person that Lin Sun's name entered their sights. But that was all. For the experts from the other domains, even if the ancient desolation realm had a powerful figure like Lin Sun, it was destined to be difficult for it to achieve anything. It was still far from being qualified to fight against them. But no one expected that the ancient desolation realm would be able to stop the army of the 7 territories because of Lin Sun. He had single-handedly annihilated the army of the 7 regions and turned the tide. This was simply too inconceivable, and it caused the expressions of all the experts from the other regions to change. They felt their hearts go cold, and they felt extremely humiliated. Lin Sun was too sharp. Ever since he made a name for himself in the 9 regions battlefield, he had been undefeated. Regardless of whether it was in the Blood Demon world, where he slaughtered his way through 30,000 miles and besieged an entire city by himself, or in the depths of the desert, where he killed a group of peak sages and saved Xiaohao from disaster. Or perhaps this time, he had single-handedly overturned the clouds and rain, suppressing the armies of the 7 regions. The bloody battle achievements he had created time and time again, how could they not be shocked and terrified? How strong is Lin Sun? This was the doubt in the hearts of many experts from the other realms. If you want to kill this brat, I guess only peerless figures like the 8 absolutes of Green Hell would make a move. There were also people who calmly analyzed the situation. This time, Lin Sun slaughtered the army of the 7 regions. Although his combat power seemed unparalleled, in reality, he had borrowed the power of the Saint Path restriction formation. Even though his true combat power was very strong, it was impossible for him to be invincible in the 9 regions battlefield. Damn it, those 2-legged sheep in the ancient desolation realm must be very proud now that they have Lin Sun as their backer. They must think that they are qualified to challenge us. Many people secretly gritted their teeth. Humph, that's because they know nothing about fear. Does Lin Sun think he can overturn the world by himself? Wishful thinking. Just wait and see. This humiliation will definitely be repaid 10-fold, or even 100-fold. A 2-legged sheep will always be a 2-legged sheep. It's impossible for him to achieve anything. Similar voices that vented the hatred and resentment in their hearts rang out incessantly in different camps. But no matter who it was, they could not deny that Lin Sun was very strong. He was a ruthless person that they should take seriously and even fear. The Blood Demon World. In the Victory Tower of the City of Tao Protectors, the big shots of the Blood Demon Ancient Realm were in a very strange mood at this moment. There was a kind of indescribable joy, but also a sense of shame and unease. They were the first to learn about the crushing defeat of the Allied forces of the 7 territories, and they were shocked and found it hard to believe. But after they calmed down, all the experts of the Blood Demon Ancient Realm rejoiced. They rejoiced that Xueqingyi had disregarded all opposition and chose not to go to war. Otherwise, they would have definitely suffered the same fate as the other 7 territories. It was no exaggeration to say that it was Xueqingyi's decision back then that had allowed the Blood Demon Ancient Realm to avoid casualties and losses. Everyone, you've all seen how sharp Lin Sun's saber is. Now, do you still blame me for being weak and cowardly? Xueqingyi stroked his chin and spoke unhurriedly from the main seat. To be honest, he had been shocked when he first heard the news. He had expected that Lin Sun would not be easy to deal with, but he had not expected that Lin Sun would not only be difficult to deal with, but he was also extremely ferocious. But after the shock, Xueqingyi felt a wave of joy in his heart. Back then, when the Blood Demon world had suffered heavy losses, he had stubbornly decided to endure it for the time being. But he had been regarded as cowardly and incompetent, which had tarnished his reputation and reduced him to a joke. Now, he finally had a chance to vent his anger. In the hall, all the big shots of the Blood Demon Ancient Realm had awkward and distressed expressions. They did not dare to meet Xueqingyi's gaze. Back then, they had also been very dissatisfied with Xueqingyi's actions and had complained about it countless times. "All right, I have no intention of blaming you," said Xueqingyi. Xueqingyi said, "I'm just curious, those guys who laughed at us before, can they still laugh now?" Everyone could not help but laugh at his words, and the atmosphere in the hall became much livelier. Xueqingyi's smile faded and he said in a low voice, "If I'm not wrong, Kun Xiaoyu, Jian Qinshen, Zhu Yingkong, and those fellows are probably planning how to take revenge and save face. Young master, should we make a move?" Someone could not help but ask. Xueqingyi snorted coldly, "What's there to do? Isn't it better to watch the tigers fight from the sidelines?" Although the 7 territories suffered a crushing defeat this time, each territory only lost 10 top sages and 30,000 soldiers. In comparison, the Blood Devil World's losses were even greater. His words caused everyone to fall silent. Back when Lin Sun stayed in the Blood Demon World and killed his way from the divine refining forest to the City of Tao Protectors, more than 30 peak saints had died in his hands. Comparatively speaking, his losses were indeed more severe than those of the other 7 territories. Xueqingyi suddenly sighed and said, "However, I'm afraid it's impossible for us to watch the tigers fight in the future. At the end of the day, the forces of the 8 territories had an agreement to kill the ancient desolation first, then compete. Even if they want to watch from the sidelines, the other 7 territories will definitely not allow it." "Young master, what do you mean?" Someone could not help but ask. "Let's wait and see. I believe that if the other 7 territories make a move again, they will definitely pull us in. It won't be too late to make a decision then, Xuechengyi said slowly after thinking for a long time. The power that Lin Sun had displayed this time made him feel a serious threat. Putting aside his selfish motives, it would naturally be best if he could kill Lin Sun as soon as possible. In Xuechengyi's view, the camp of the ancient desolation was still not worth paying attention to. Only Lin Sun was a serious threat. As long as he could kill Lin Sun, the camp of the ancient desolation was destined to collapse, and there would no longer be any threat. Unfortunately, Xuechengyi also knew that it would not be easy to kill a ruthless character like Lin Sun. If the camp of the ancient desolation wants to fight against the 8 territories, what do they lack the most? Xuechengyi suddenly asked. Without waiting for the others to speak, he continued, it's the number of peak saints. It's impossible for Lin Sun alone to change the situation of the camp of the ancient desolation. Only when more and more peak saints appear can they have the strength to challenge us. Speaking of this, Xuechengyi could not help but smile. If I were Lin Sun, I would definitely try to find a way to help the experts in the camp who have the potential to become saints fight for the opportunity to become saints. And the opportunity to become saints will only appear in the magnetic secret realm that will descend in half a year. The camp of the ancient desolation will definitely not miss it. His scarlet eyes were as bright as the sun, extremely frightening. If we want to set up a trap to kill Lin Sun, this is undoubtedly the best opportunity. But speaking of this, Xuechengyi shook his head again. However, this opportunity is also the most dangerous. If the 8 territories work together, we can naturally kill Lin Sun. But if we let him escape, there will be endless troubles in the future. So, the safest way is to send the elite forces of the 8 territories into the magnetic secret realm when the magnetic secret realm descends, and kill all the people in the ancient desolation who have the potential to become saints. This is equivalent to cutting off the foundation of the ancient desolation and the 8 territories fighting for hegemony. At that time, Lin Sun and a few other peak saints are bound to be unable to change the situation of certain defeat. Xuechengyi stood up, glanced at the crowd, and said, remember, in the period before the magnetic secret realm descends, kill all the experts of the ancient desolation who appear in the blood demon realm. Regardless of whether or not there are peak 9th retribution immortal realm experts in our territory, we would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. In addition, send a message to the other 7 territories in my name. Tell them that if they want to destroy the ancient desolation, they must first kill those who have set foot on the peak, but have not yet become saints. In this way, even if Lin Sun's combat strength is unparalleled, he will not be able to do anything alone. In this way, the defeat of the ancient desolation will be certain. If the leaders of the 7 territories are not stupid, they should know what to do next. Of course, it does not matter whether they listen to my advice or not. After saying this, he walked out of the hall with his hands behind his back, his figure tall and proud. The real battle had just begun. Sooner or later, he, Xuechengyi, would wash away the shame he had suffered. Chapter 1573. 5 days later, the city wall was completed. The golden city wall, stained with blood and piled with skeletons, was only 390 meters high. It wasn't majestic, but it was still breathtaking. The city wall was like a giant golden dragon coiling around the earth, encircling the area within 100 miles. The bricks on the wall were as smooth as mirrors, neat and seamless. The blood-stained walls gave the golden walls an aura that made people's hearts palpitate. Condense. In the sky, Lin Sun, who hadn't rested for 5 days and 5 nights, waved his sleeves, and his black eyes lit up. Boom! Along with a strange fluctuation, a golden beam of light soared into the sky, scattering and shattering the clouds in the sky. The city walls that had just been completed suddenly revealed expanse after expanse of gorgeous Tao marking diagrams, causing a rain of light to spray down while divine radiance flowed, and it was dazzling and resplendent. all the overlords of the ancient desolation realm in the camp were alarmed. When he raised his eyes and looked over, golden divine rainbows shot up between heaven and earth. There were thousands upon thousands of them, and as they swayed in the void, they condensed into flower buds of the great Tao, auspicious and divine. In the end, the phenomenon of a vast starry sky actually appeared in the sky. A myriad of dazzling stars flickered within it, and they circulated without end. It was deep and vast. Stars in daytime. Witnessing this phenomenon, everyone was stunned. The golden city bathed in the boundless starry sky was like a country inhabited by gods. It's just building a city, but it caused such a phenomenon? This is the work of the gods. Xiaohao was stunned, his heart pounding. Ruowu couldn't help but walk forward and touch the wall with her fingertip. Instantly, a circle of restriction rippled and spread on the smooth, mirror-like wall. If one looked carefully, the bricks on the wall were dyed with strands of a blood-red color, and it was like a faint crimson glow. Moreover, one could faintly see numerous broken corpses embedded within the bricks, and it was a horrifying sight. "It's beautiful, but also terrifying," Ruowu murmured. Ruowu murmured. Standing so close to the city wall, she could feel an oppressive aura that was contained but not released, condensed but not revealed. It was the perfect combination of the divine path restriction array and the city wall. In the camp, the overlords of the ancient desolation realm recovered from the shock. They couldn't help but burst into cheers. From now on, the realm of ancient desolation would have a new city of Tao protectors, a city that had triggered unusual phenomena in heaven and earth on the day of its completion, and all this was thanks to Lin Sun. High in the sky, Lin Sun couldn't hide his tiredness. 5 days ago, he had single-handedly trapped and killed the army of the 7 regions. Then, he had not stopped to rest, spending 5 days to build this city. This had greatly exhausted his mental and physical strength. But at this time, when he heard the cheers of the crowd and saw the magnificent city under his feet, Lin Sun smiled with pride. This was his city. It was also a fortress that sheltered all the experts in the ancient wasteland domain. But soon, Lin Sun took a deep breath and took out several holy treasures. Each holy treasure had tens of thousands of cultivators trapped in it. Without any hesitation or pity, as Lin Sun waved his sleeve, these holy treasures were all embedded under the city wall. Then, rivers of blood flowed out of the holy treasures and seeped into the depths of the earth. In the end, countless white bones gushed out and filled every corner of the city wall. More than 100,000 soldiers from the 7 regions who had been trapped in the city were all sacrificed on the day of the completion of the city of Tao protectors. In the sky, the mourning of the holy treasures resounded again, and the color of blood spread like a tide. Because many of the enemies who were sacrificed were at the true saint realm. Slaughtering more than 100,000 people in one fell swoop would definitely be regarded as a butcher in the outside world, and he would bear the infamy of cruelty, coldness, and ruthlessness. But Lin Sun didn't care, and his mood didn't fluctuate at all. The enemy's city of Tao protectors was built with the corpses and blood of the sages of the ancient desolation realm. He, Lin Sun, was just paying blood for blood and a tooth for a tooth. As the saying went, the immortal cause was to kill the enemy. It was better to let the enemy gnash their teeth in hatred than to let them curse his name. Soon Ruowu and Xiaohao also guessed this. They looked at each other and couldn't help but feel shocked. In the camp, the experts of the ancient desolation realm also understood. They all felt their blood boiling, and they couldn't help but feel excited. "Good job! Good job! That's what a man should do!" Their shouts resounded through the sky and echoed in the wilderness. Lin Sun landed in the midst of the cheers and shouts. He said to Xiaohao and Ruowu, "I have to take a rest. I'll have to trouble you two to take care of the rest." "Go ahead," Xiaohao and Ruowu urged with a smile. Lin Sun nodded. He was indeed too tired, and he needed a good rest. Next, it's time to divide the city and build buildings for each cultivator. By the way, the first thing is to build a palace for Lin Sun, Xiao Hao said in a low voice. Leave these trivial things to me. Ruo Wu smiled. Xiao Hao nodded. After thinking for a while, he said, All right. According to my speculation, it won't be long before more and more experts from the ancient Desolation realm hear the news and gather with us. We need to set some rules. Ruo Wu frowned and sneered. Before we built the city, there were only 60,000 experts who came to support us. Now that we've built the city, they want to come and take advantage of us. How can there be such a good thing in this world? As far as she knew, there were at least 300,000 experts from the ancient Desolation realm who had entered the 9-region battlefield. Even if many of them had been killed by the enemies of the 8 regions in the past year, it was impossible for there to be only 60,000 of them left. Obviously, some of the experts didn't believe that Lin Sun could succeed before the city was built, so they didn't come to support him. Perhaps it was out of concern for their own safety, which was understandable. But Ruo Wu couldn't bear to see these experts running out to seek shelter in the city of Dao Protectors. Xiao Hao smiled casually. This has nothing to do with taking advantage of us. In the end, we're all on the same side. Moreover, who would have thought that Lin Sun could really resist the threat of the 8 regions and rebuild the city of Dao Protectors? Ruo Wu sighed softly. Yes, we're on the same side, so we can only consider the overall situation. Speaking up to here, a wisp of killing intent flashed in her starry eyes, and her voice became cold. However, I can tolerate them coming to take advantage of us. But if anyone dares to cause trouble, don't blame me for being rude. After saying that, she turned around and left. Xiao Hao smiled and didn't say anything. If it wasn't for the 9-region battlefield, the experts in the ancient Desolation realm would have many conflicts and grudges between them. For example, Lin Sun was regarded as a thorn in the flesh by many ancient orthodoxies in the ancient Desolation realm. If Lin Sun cared about these personal grudges, how could he have poured all his efforts into rebuilding the city of Dao Protectors? However, the situation was different now. Even Lin Sun's enemies didn't dare to go against Lin Sun at this time. Otherwise, Lin Sun wouldn't even have to do anything before those experts who supported him would swarm over and tear him to pieces. This was the general trend. After resisting the enemies from the 7 regions and rebuilding the city of Dao Protectors, Lin Sun's prestige had reached an unprecedented height. It wasn't exaggerated to say that he was the leader of the ancient Desolation realm, and he was unanimously acknowledged and respected by many experts. Going against him was no different than going against the entire ancient Desolation realm. Of course, Xiao Hao hoped that those experts who once viewed Lin Sun as their enemy would have some backbone and not come to the city of Dao Protectors. However, neither Xiao Hao nor Ruo Wu had expected that a storm of blood had arisen in the territories of the 8 regions against the experts of the ancient Desolation realm. All of this was because of a piece of news that Xueqingyi had conveyed. If they wanted to destroy the ancient Desolation realm, then they had to kill all the top figures in the ancient Desolation realm. Retribution. In the Ninely world, an expert of the ancient Desolation realm, who had just escaped death, let out an extremely sorrowful howl. At first, just like the other experts of the ancient Desolation realm, this person didn't believe that Lin Sun could rebuild the city of Dao Protectors, so he chose to bear with it and watch from the sidelines. But when he learned that Lin Sun had single-handedly resisted the siege of the 7 regions' armies and successfully rebuilt the city of Dao Protectors in the ancient Desolation realm, his first thought was to go to the ancient Desolation realm and seek protection from the city of Dao Protectors. Many people had the same idea as him. They excitedly set off together, hoping that once they arrived at the city of Dao Protectors, they wouldn't have to hide from place to place anymore, and they wouldn't have to live in fear anymore. But who would have thought that they would be besieged by a bloody group of people halfway through their journey? At the end of the battle, he was the only one who was lucky enough to survive and kill his way out of the encirclement. At the thought of this, he couldn't help but feel sad. If he had known this would happen, he would have gone to the ancient desolation realm. Unfortunately, it was too late for regret. Over there, quick! This two-legged sheep can actually escape until now. He can be considered a tough character. In the distance, a group of experts from the ninely ancient desolation realm rushed over with murderous intent. The expert from the ancient desolation realm stiffened, and his face turned ashen. It's over, puff. Before long, scarlet blood splashed everywhere. The expert from the ancient desolation realm lay on the ground. Even at the moment of his death, he thought that if he had gone to the ancient desolation realm, perhaps everything would have been different. Similar scenes were taking place in the territories of the 8 regions camp. It should be known that the experts from the ancient desolation realm, who were scattered in different regions, were all hiding very well. But under the crazy revenge of the forces of the 8 regions, many of them were found and killed without exception. Of course, there were also many experts from the ancient desolation realm who had gone through many dangers to break out of the encirclement of the enemies and finally arrived at the ancient desolation realm. When they saw the golden city of Tao protectors standing on the horizon, emitting a sacred and immortal aura, these experts from the ancient desolation realm, who had been hiding in fear for the past year, had an impulse to cry. However, as they approached the city of Tao protectors step by step, they felt a little nervous and uneasy. When they were building the city of Tao protectors, they were worried about their own safety, so they didn't come to help Lin Sun. But now that they had come to seek protection, would they be turned away? Chapter 1574. Half a month later, Lin Sun woke up from his meditation. His eyes were clear and tranquil. Now, he was completely familiar with and controlled the power of the absolute saint realm. He also knew how difficult it was to take every step in the path of the saint realm. Diligent cultivation was the most fundamental, but it also required a lot of comprehension and experience. If he only relied on closed doors to build a car, he was destined to stop moving forward. Other than that, the cultivation of the 3 paths of qi refinement, spirit refinement, and body refinement, the comprehension of the power of the great Tao, and the tempering of the power of the martial Tao all required a lot of time and energy. Currently, Lin Sun's cultivation in the true saint realm could only be said to be stable. It belonged to the perfection of the initial realm, and was still a step away from the middle true saint realm. However, his source of Tao Mountain was extremely firm and strong, so it made him almost invincible in this realm. Of course, this was only cultivation. The strength of the saint realm was closely related to the power of the great Tao, the power of the martial Tao, and the treasures one controlled. Lin Sun had already touched the threshold of creating his own saint technique, and had comprehended the mystery of 3 Taos unite, essence is one. Being invincible in the absolute true saint realm was just around the corner. Old man, how's the refinement of my treasure? Lin Sun's mind moved, and a green branch emerged. Then, with a flash of divine light, it turned into an ancient tree with dense branches and leaves, and a strong trunk. It was the divine refining ancestral tree that Lin Sun had taken away from the secret realm of the underground palace. Just one last step. The divine refining ancestral tree said quickly. As it spoke, its branches and leaves shook, and with a clang, a snow-white broken blade flew out. Even I didn't expect this treasure to be so incredible. If it was any other divine weapon, with my strength, it would be enough to refine it to perfection, but this treasure is like a bottomless pit. In the past half a year, I don't know how much of my source energy has been consumed. At the end, the divine refining ancestral tree seemed to be in pain as it rambled on. Young man, my vitality has been greatly damaged. I need to use some treasures of heaven and earth to make up for it. What chaotic life soil, 5-colored spirit soil, clear turbid star sand. They can barely do it. There will definitely be benefits for you in the future. Lin Sun answered perfunctorily and took the broken sword in his hand to observe. Half a year ago, when he decided to rebuild the city of Tao Protectors, Lin Sun had given the broken blade to the God Refinement ancestral tree to nurture and refine it. The reason why Lin Sun had used the Yuan killer sword when he was fighting against the Seven Regions army was that Duanren was still being nurtured at that time. Not bad, not bad. Soon, Lin Sun showed a strange look and exclaimed. After half a year of refinement, the broken blade had obviously undergone a great transformation. Its sharpness was restrained, and its brilliance was contained. It did not look as illusory and gorgeous as before. Instead, it had a kind of obscure charm. This is called divine objects conceal themselves. The origin of this treasure is definitely extraordinary. The God Refinement ancestral tree interrupted from the side. All those years ago, I followed the Sky-Split Emperor all over the world, and I've seen countless peerless treasures. However, I've never seen such a peculiar broken blade. Unfortunately, it's incomplete, and it's very difficult to imagine how formidable it would be when it's complete. However, it's fortunate that it's incomplete, and that's why you were able to subdue it and refine it into your own natal treasure. Otherwise, you're bound to be unable to make use of it with your strength at the ultimate saint realm. Lin Sun glanced at this chatterbox tree, and he couldn't help but feel surprised in his heart. After all, regardless of whether it was the broken blade, the God-Eater beetle, the spirit refinement gourd that had a drop of violet blood sealed within it, or the Rahu's horn, all of them were obtained by him from the ancient spirit world. As for the ancient spirit world, until now, Lin Sun was still unable to figure out exactly where this world was located. Because he'd been teleported to the ancient spirit world while he was traversing the heaven-span secret realm. Look, there are 3 mysterious Tao patterns imprinted on this blade, forming the 3 words Yuan, Ji and Ju. The divine refining ancestral tree said quickly, but it's obvious that it's incomplete. There should still be the last word that hasn't appeared. Moreover, unless you can find the missing part of the broken blade, the last word will never appear. Lin Sun deeply agreed. He had long noticed this problem. He asked, "Do you think that with my strength, can I repair the broken blade?" "Impossible." The divine refining ancestral tree said without hesitation, "Such a rare treasure involves the power of inheritance, and cannot be replaced with other materials. However, if you use your own Saint Tao power to nurture it, this treasure will be able to transform into a natal holy weapon for you to use." Lin Sun nodded, put away the broken blade, and nurtured it in the black hole in his body. With a slight sense, all the aura that the broken blade possessed surged into his heart, causing Lin Sun's spirit to be lifted. He had a strong premonition that he only needed an opportunity to transform the broken blade into his own natal holy weapon. "Speaking of which, I still don't know how to address you." Lin Sun raised his head and looked at the divine refining ancestral tree. At this moment, the divine refining ancestral tree felt like crying. "Kid, you really don't take me seriously, do you?" In a serious tone, it said seriously, "Remember, my Dharma name is Empty God, and it was personally given by the sky-splitting emperor." "Kidney deficiency?" Lin Sun was startled, the corner of his mouth twitched, and he praised, "This Dharma name is definitely famous and amazing." The Empty God was proud. "Of course, this is a Dharma name given by the emperor." Lin Sun smiled. "In the future, if you follow me, I will definitely not let you suffer a loss. If nothing goes wrong, I will definitely make a trip to the Kunlun ruins in the future. I heard that it contains ancient wood, profound Qi earth essence, origin water." As Lin Sun reported the treasures of heaven and earth, the Empty God almost drooled. He said anxiously, "Brother, you must bring me along." "Of course." Lin Sun agreed readily. This divine refining ancestral tree called Empty God obviously had an extraordinary origin, and it was a rare divine tree. It would be good to keep it by his side. Not long after, Lin Sun pushed the door open and walked out. The current city of Tao Protectors had undergone earth-shaking changes. The The streets were spacious, extending in all directions, and row upon row of buildings rose from the ground. The streets were filled with pedestrians and carriages. Regardless of gender, age, or cultivation, everyone wore a relaxed smile that came from the bottom of their hearts. There were even tea-houses and restaurants in many places. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Lin Sun would have suspected that this was not the nine-region battlefield, but a peaceful and bustling city. But after thinking about it, Lin Sun felt relieved. Among the practitioners in the city, the weakest one was in the longevity tribulation realm. It was a piece of cake for them to build a building in the city. Brother Lin, Child Lin, Senior Lin. Along the way, wherever Lin Sun appeared, he would inevitably be greeted by many people with admiration, respect, and eagerness. Some reserved people even called Lin Sun Senior. As the saying went, those who reached the peak were the teachers. Lin Sun had now set foot in the saint realm. In terms of cultivation alone, he could be called a senior. Not to mention that it was with his own strength that he had miraculously built the city of Tao protectors and provided a safe place for the experts in the ancient desolation realm. Who could not respect him? Not long after, Lin Sun heard the whereabouts of Xiaohao and Ruowu. He was about to go there when he heard a quarrel in the distance. Humph! Why should the Black Demon Tengu clan be the scouts and go to the outside world to investigate the enemy? On the street in the distance, a black-robed old man said with a gloomy face, "You want the experts of my clan to die? No way. I'll say it here today. The people of my clan will never agree to this." Many experts from the major forces of the ancient desolation realm had gathered around to watch the show. The black-robed old man was a true Saint Realm expert of the Black Demon Tengu clan, named Go Tianqi. Go Tianqi, we are all members of the ancient desolation realm. As everyone knows, the Black Demon Tengu clan is best at investigating the enemy. My young master's arrangement is not wrong. In front of Go Tianqi, a beautiful and refined woman with a graceful bearing spoke indifferently. Huanin. Lin soon recognized her at a glance. She was one of Xiaohao's personal maids. She had served Xiaohao together with Yao Li, Yu Shi, and Bai Gon in the extreme desolation realm. Cut the crap. Go Tianqi's face darkened and he sneered. You want to die? Sure, the Black Demon Tengu clan will not accompany Xiaohao to his death. Huanin couldn't help but be angry. Go Tianqi smiled and said, Little girl, remember, the Black Demon Tengu clan is also a member of the ancient desolation realm. The affairs of the ancient desolation realm are not decided by Xiaohao. Go Tianqi. Huanin's eyes were cold. Go Tianqi frowned and said, Little girl, if you dared to talk to me like this in the ancient desolation realm, you would have been dead long ago. Even if Xiaohao came, he wouldn't dare to bully you. Many people in the crowd laughed out loud. Most of them were the strong people who were on good terms with the Black Demon Tengu clan. Huanin took a deep breath and calmed herself down. You're on your own. Go Tianqi's face was full of sarcasm. He didn't take this threat seriously at all. Xiaohao was strong, but would he dare to kill people in the city? Wasn't he afraid of arousing the disgust of all the strong people in the ancient desolation realm? Old dog, you're laughing very happily. Suddenly, an indifferent voice sounded in Go Tianqi's ears. He looked up and saw a young man in a moon-white robe coming from afar with his hands behind his back. The surrounding people were stunned. When they recognized the young man, they couldn't help but change their expressions. They kept quiet out of fear and kept a distance from Go Tianqi. When he heard the extremely humiliating word old dog, Go Tianqi was angry at first. His eyes flashed with killing intent and his old face became gloomy. But when he recognized the identity of the person who spoke, his whole body suddenly stiffened. His expression kept changing and he looked frightened. Chapter 1575. Go Tianqi was one of the experts who'd entered the city of Tao protectors not long ago, so he'd naturally heard of Lin Sun's deeds. However, He'd never imagined that Lin Sun would appear at this critical moment. He couldn't help but be horrified by this. A long time passed before he took a deep breath and grunted coldly. Lin Sun, so it was you. Out of consideration for the fact that you've established the city of Tao Protectors, my Black Nightmare Tengu clan won't make things difficult for you. I hope you understand that this is the 9-region battlefield. Regardless of whether we had enmity in the past, we're on the same side now, and we should naturally unite against an external force. Everyone in the surroundings was filled with disdain. This old fellow's face changed so quickly. Lin Sun nodded. I won't fuss about our enmity in the past now. Go Tianqi heaved a sigh of relief, but Lin Sun's next words caused his expression to change abruptly. However, the ancient desolation camp doesn't accept trash. Go Tianqi's face flushed red with anger, and he forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and said, If we don't get along, then I'll take my leave. With that, he flicked his sleeve and was about to leave. However, Lin Sun said indifferently, If you dare to leave, then no one from the Black Sea Tengu clan will be allowed to step into this city from today onwards. Go Tianqi's body stiffened as if he'd been struck by lightning. If it was in the past, he would definitely scoff at such a threat. But now, he didn't dare to take it lightly. At the very least, Lin Sun had absolute authority in the city of Tao Protectors. Just a word from him was enough to decide the fate of the Black Sea Tengu clan. Lin Sun, aren't you abusing your position to take revenge? Go Tianqi's expression was livid as he spoke word by word. Slap. Lin Sun slapped Go Tianqi from afar, causing blood to spray from his nose and mouth, and he fell to the ground with a red and swollen face. Everyone in the surroundings kept quiet out of fear. Lin Sun stepped forward and looked down at Go Tianqi as he said indifferently, I built this city alone, and I decide all the rules and freedoms. So what if I'm abusing my position to take revenge? Are you going to bite me? Go Tianqi trembled with rage, and he gritted his teeth tightly as he hissed, Aren't you afraid that you'll disappoint the ancient desolation camp by acting so brazenly? Bah! You old dog are so shameless. If there was no child Lin, how could there be such a city? Letting your Black Sea Tengu race into the city is already benevolent enough, but you guys don't know how to be grateful. You're simply cruel and unscrupulous. Before Lin opened his mouth, someone couldn't help rebuking loudly. Right, this old fellow is too shameless. If I was young Master Lin, I'd definitely be the first to slaughter him. Get lost, old fool. The city of Tao Protectors doesn't welcome your Black Sea Tengu clan. Instantly, a wave of cursing resounded in the vicinity, and it seemed like he was being condemned by the masses. For a moment, Go Tianqi was dumbfounded. He was ashamed, angry, and shocked. He didn't know where to put his face. In the ancient desolation realm, he was a true saint. Wherever he went, he would be respected. But now, he was hated by everyone like a rat on the street. Old dog, take care. Lin Sun didn't want to argue with him at the moment, so he left. Wan Rong hurried to catch up with him. Her heart was filled with unspeakable joy as she said, Young Master Lin, thank you so much for your help this time. Lin Sun waved his hand and said, If it was Xiaohao, he wouldn't have tolerated his arrogance either. Alas, my young master is too kind. Today, more than 100,000 experts of the ancient desolation realm have gathered in the city of Tao Protectors. There are all kinds of birds in a big forest. I wonder how many guys like that old dog are enjoying the fruits of others' labor, and they're even unwilling to contribute. Wan Rong sighed softly. Moreover, there are many experts who have secretly colluded with each other and refused all orders. You also know that we're in the same camp. But if everyone goes their own way and doesn't listen to orders and only knows how to enjoy the fruits of others' labor, then what's the difference between us and a plate of loose sand? A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes as he said, I understand. Before long, Lin Sun met Xiaohao and Ruowu in a magnificent palace. The two seemed to be talking about something. When they saw Lin Sun, their eyes lit up and they said, "The one who makes the decision is finally here." Lin Sun was stunned. Ruo Wu said with a smile, "There are a lot of troubles in the city these days. Fortunately, everything is under control." Xiao Hao also smiled and said, "Now, you're the only one who needs to make a decision." Lin Sun became more and more confused. What decision? Recently, there have been many restless guys in the city, such as the Black Demon Tengu tribe, the descendants of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land, and so on. Ruo Wu and I have been keeping an eye on them. As long as you give the order, they will be sent to the most dangerous place to carry out your order. Xiao Hao's voice was gentle, but the coldness in his words was full of killing intent. "So you've been fishing for a long time?" Lin Sun vaguely understood. Ruo Wu smiled and said, "To resist foreign aggression, we must first settle the internal problems. If we don't get rid of the internal problems, how can the ancient desolation compete with the foreign enemies of the 8 regions in the future?" Lin Sun thought for a while. What if those restless guys refuse to follow orders? A cold light flashed in Ruo Wu's eyes. Kill 1 to warn 100. This isn't the ancient desolation. Whoever dares to oppose the orders is an enemy of the ancient desolation. Just kill them. Lin Sun felt a lot more relaxed. On the way here, he had been thinking about how to solve this problem. He didn't expect that Ruo Wu and Xiao Hao had already thought of all the measures. He said with a smile, "You can do it. Why do you have to wait for me to make the decision?" Ruo Wu rolled her eyes and said, "The ancient desolation only accepts your orders now. You're their recognized leader. If we make a decision, we won't be able to convince them." Lin Sun smiled bitterly. "Leader? Why do I feel that you're laughing at me?" But in the end, Lin Sun agreed without hesitation. On the same day, a storm was set off in the city of Tao Protectors under the instigation of Xiao Hao and Ruo Wu. To Lin Sun's surprise, the Black Demon Tengu tribe changed their attitude and took the initiative to cooperate. They agreed to any order without hesitation. Obviously, Go Tianqi also realized that something was wrong after being taught a lesson by Lin Sun and changed his attitude. Of course, there were still some experts who refused to listen to orders. Most of them were powerful figures from some ancient orthodoxies. They thought themselves superior and didn't take Lin Sun's orders seriously. However, in the evening of the same day, after Xiao Hao personally killed more than 10 people who had long been identified as internal threats, the restless voices instantly disappeared. This was called killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Then, during this period of time, these experts who had been very restless were all arranged to carry out some extremely dangerous missions. For example, spying, gathering intelligence, patrolling the ancient desolation world, and so on. No matter how unwilling they were, they could only bow their heads obediently. Anyone who wasn't stupid could see that Lin Sun, Xiao Hao, and Ruo Wu were in the city of Tao Protectors. Anyone who dared to oppose them would be courting death. For a moment, the atmosphere in the city of Tao Protectors changed. Although the rules weren't strict, no one dared to resist Xiao Hao and Ruo Wu's orders anymore. As for Lin Sun, he didn't have the mood to care about such trivial matters. On that very day, he left the campsite swiftly. There were still around 5 months before the arrival of the magnetic secret realm, and Lin Sun intended to seize this time to search for Zhao Jingxian. More than a year had passed since the 9 regions battlefield opened, but there was still no news of Zhao Jingxian. How could Lin Sun not be worried? A few days later, on a wasteland in the Star Fiend domain, a group of experts from the Star Fiend ancient domain were gathering a divine material called the 9-leaf violet shade wood. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of them. He was tall and wore a moon-white robe, and his bearing was otherworldly like that of an immortal. It was Lin Sun. "Who are you?" Someone shouted and revealed a fearful expression. "Have you seen this person?" Lin Sun flicked his finger, and then a screen of light appeared and reflected Zhao Jingxuan's graceful figure. "Not to mention whether we've seen him or not, why should we tell you? Someone laughed out of extreme anger. Lin Sun didn't waste any time and waved his sleeve. The group of experts from the star-fiend ancient domain were instantly killed on the spot. Whoosh! In the next moment, Little Silver rushed out and swept into the remaining souls of these corpses to investigate. After a while, Little Silver shook his head. No. Lin Sun nodded and turned to leave. Half a month later. Jili Domain. Have you seen this person? A group of Jili ancient domain experts was stopped, but Lin Sun still didn't waste any time. He condensed the light screen depicting Zhao Jingxuan's image and asked directly. No. These people were all intimidated by Lin Sun's aura and were terrified. But in the end, when Lin Sun left, none of them were spared. 1 month. 2 months. Lin Sun's footprints started from the Star Fiend domain, all the way across the Jili domain, the Heavenly Fire domain, the Absolute Yin domain with his current cultivation and combat strength. He didn't reveal his tracks wherever he went. All the experts he asked were wiped out one by one, leaving no traces behind. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, these foreign enemy forces didn't notice that Lin Sun, who they hated and feared, had quietly walked through their territory. But so far, Lin Sun had found nothing. This made Lin Sun more and more worried. He didn't dare to think what he would do if something happened to Zhao Jingxian. Where is Zhao Jingxian now? On this day, in a mountain range in the Dalua world, Lin Sun walked alone between the ravines and streams, frowning and looking lost. Who? Someone can find this place? Stop him. Don't let anyone disturb the young master's action. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out, waking Lin Sun from his contemplation. Looking up, it turned out that he had come to a green lake in the depths of the mountain unknowingly. The lake was vast, with bright burning lotus flowers in full bloom. Above the lake, there was an invisible door to a secret realm. Chapter 1576. The jade green lake was vast like a mirror that was embedded in the depths of the mountains, and there were numerous fiery red lotus flowers growing on it. Originally, the scenery here was picturesque, yet now, the air was filled with killing intent. Over 10 supreme sages from the all-heaven world had a murderous aura as they sealed off this area, and merely the aura they emanated caused the heavens and the earth to dim down. There were both men and women amongst these supreme sages, handsome young men and gray-haired old men. However, all of them carried swords. Some carried swords on their backs, some embraced them, some placed their swords before their knees, some carried swords by their waists, and some hung their swords before them. Shockingly, it was a group of supreme sword saints. The all-heaven ancient region was a world of sword cultivators, and sword sects stood in great numbers there. Sword cultivators were numerous like the clouds in the sky, and the people of the world respected the sword. Amongst the 9 regions, merely in terms of combat strength, the all-heaven ancient region could firmly be ranked in the top 3. The reason was that there were too many sword cultivators in this region, and their combat strength was the most powerful and terrifying. However, Lin Sun had never imagined that there would actually be so many sword saints before such a desolate lake amidst lofty mountains and lofty mountains. Moreover, every single one of them had stepped foot onto the peak of the sword Dao. However, Lin Sun merely frowned and didn't stop. He took a step forward and gazed at the lake. There was a door to a secret realm there, and it seemed as if it had appeared out of thin air. There was no need to guess at all. These supreme sword saints from the all-heaven ancient region had come for this secret realm. Moreover, the young master they spoke of had obviously entered the door to the secret realm. A young man from the ancient desolation region. No, this is a supreme saint realm expert. At the same time, the 10+ supreme sword saints from the all-heaven ancient region had locked onto Lin Sun's figure at the first possible moment, and their gazes flickered while they revealed strange expressions. Could it be him? A black-clothed beautiful woman who held a sword in her arms seemed to have guessed something, and her slender and long brows raised. Who? There are only 3 supreme saints in the ancient desolation region now. One is Xiaohao, one is Ruowu, and the last is naturally the infamous Lin Sun. The black-clothed beautiful woman spoke slowly while strands of peerlessly sharp sword insight surged within her eyes, and it even slashed countless fine cracks in space. This man looks young and has an unworldly aura, just like Lin Sun in the rumors. Now, who do you think he is? As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd became restless. It was him? The eyes of the solitary sword sacred sages glistened. They withdrew the disdain in their hearts and unleashed a sharp aura. Some of them were ready to make a move, some were full of killing intent, some were surprised, and some were smiling playfully. Lin Sun actually dared to appear in their exalted realm. On the surface of the jade-green lake, numerous crimson-colored lotus flowers rustled as they shattered into powder that scattered onto the surface of the lake, and it dyed an expanse of rouge red. At this moment, the atmosphere between heaven and earth was so oppressive that it was suffocating. Lin Sun's reputation was like a tree's shadow. He had long been known by all the experts of the 9 regions. His deeds were still one of the hottest topics on the 9 regions battlefield. He had once wreaked havoc in the Blood Demon world and humiliated the Blood Demon ancient region. He had also set up a saint restriction to trap and kill the allied forces of the 7 regions, killing 70 peak stage sages and destroying a 210,000-strong army. Who wouldn't know such a notorious and ruthless person whose hands were stained with blood? Who would dare to look down on him? However, the solitary sword sacred sages from the exalted realm did not expect to see Lin Sun here. This was too surprising. Lin Sun, how dare you barge into the exalted realm? Aren't you afraid of death? As far as I know, you are the leader of the ancient desolation realm. If you die, the ancient desolation realm will definitely collapse and vanish. A handsome young man with a sword on his back stood with a cold expression and a cold gaze. His words caused the murderous aura in the area to become even more intense. If an ordinary true sage was here, just the terrifying murderous aura in the area would cause him to collapse and fall into despair. However, Lin Sun seemed to turn a blind eye to all the enemies. He raised his finger and a light screen appeared, outlining Zhao Jingxuan's figure. Have you seen this person before? It was still the same question, but all the experts who had heard it had been killed. The peak stage sword sacred sages were stunned and almost fell into chaos. Previously, they thought that Lin Sun had come personally because he had heard some news and wanted to disrupt their operation. Thus, they took it seriously and did not dare to be negligent. Who would have thought that this guy was actually here to look for someone? The black-clothed beautiful woman suddenly sneered. Is this your confidant? She looks very beautiful, but from the looks of it, she's probably in trouble. Otherwise, if she knew of your reputation in the 9 regions battlefield, how could she not look for you? There was a hint of sarcasm in her voice, as if she was taking pleasure in Lin Sun's misfortune. Ridiculous! Another person said with a cold expression, if we had seen this woman, do you think she would still be alive? You foolishly came to inquire about information from the enemy. Are you, Lin Sun, stupid? Even if we've seen this woman before, do you think we'll tell you? There were also people who sneered and felt that Lin Sun's behavior of looking for someone was simply too idiotic. Lin Sun put away the light screen on his fingertip and glanced at the peak stage sword sacred sages. Do all of you cultivate the sword Tao? Of course. Everyone sneered again. Which expert in the great Luo ancient domain didn't cultivate the sword Tao? I have a sword. Do you have the guts to see it? Lin Sun was calm. It was a light sentence, but it caused the peak stage sword sacred sages to suffer the greatest humiliation and provocation in the world. They were peak stage sword saints, and all of them had been immersed in the sword Tao for countless years. Even in the great Luo ancient domain, they were respected by tens of thousands of people. But now, a young man from the ancient desolation domain asked them if they had the guts to see it. How arrogant was this tone! I want to see what's so mysterious about this sword of yours. If it's not enough, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave today." Someone snorted coldly, and the sword chi around him soared into the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds. Sword practitioners belong to the category of great ferocity. They would rather break than bend and kill without fear. Just based on these words, you will definitely be beheaded here today. There were also people with indifferent expressions, their clothes fluttering in the wind. Rumor has it that this guy is a Dao inscription master, but he actually dares to challenge us with the sword Dao. How ridiculous is that? Someone sneered. Although they said so, these peak stage sword saints were not careless. They all ran their chi and waited for Lin Sun. They had all heard of Lin Sun's strength, but as the peak stage sword saints, they didn't believe that they didn't even have the ability to see Lin Sun's sword. Clang! 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 In the nearby void, the sound of swords resounded through the sky like tides. Every peak stage sword saint was like a divine sword with the power to penetrate the sky and earth. Just the power they exuded had a kind of sharp and unparalleled sword intent. This world was turbulent and all things were murderous. One sword is enough to break your sword courage. Lin Sun suddenly raised his head, and his abyss-like eyes, like a pair of divine swords, pierced through the void and glanced at the crowd. At that moment, many people only felt their hearts tremble, and their bodies suddenly became stiff. Their eyes flickered, and they felt an inexplicable pressure. Without hesitation, they ran their chi to the extreme. More than a dozen peak stage sword saints were like more than a dozen peerless swords. Their sword intent covered the sky and the earth, covering all directions, so that the mountains and rivers within 1,000 miles collapsed in an instant, and the rocks and plants were all crushed by the fierce chi. At this moment, a Taoist sword appeared behind Lin Sun and suddenly swept out. It was silent. This sword was so clean that there was no impurity, like the clearest spring water in the world. But when it was stabbed out, it fell into the eyes of the peak stage sword saints, but it was a different scene. It was obviously a sword, but it seemed to have turned into thousands of swords, densely packed like a torrent, filling the world, filling the mountains and rivers, and covering the starry sky. It was everywhere. It was everywhere. In a trance, the countless sword chi turned into layers of sword formations, covering the sky and the sun. Sword Dao was the sharpest way of attack in the world. On the other hand, this sword strike revealed a boundless, immeasurable, and all-encompassing aura. It was fierce to the extreme and terrifying to the extreme. Rumble! This expanse of the heavens and the earth seemed to have exploded apart. It was unable to endure the might of this sword strike, and the surroundings were filled with boundless and vast sword chi. Intense sounds of collision resounded in the surroundings, and it was mixed with shocked and furious cries. Sword chi swept out violently, and it was dazzling and resplendent, causing the sun and moon to dim in comparison. Firstly, the peak stage sword saint that was handsome like a youth was unable to endure it. The origin sword before him wailed while he bled from all 7 apertures, and he let out muffled groans of pain. After that, the black-clothed beautiful woman's body was sliced by numerous strands of sword chi, and she was utterly unable to resist or deal with them. In the blink of an eye, she was mangled and unrecognizable. After that, numerous peak stage sword saints were heavily injured. Some had their bodies pierced through, some had their arms severed, some had their waists slashed apart. All of this occurred in an instant. On the other hand, the boundless and boundless sword chi was still whistling through the surroundings, and it caused the mountains and rivers in the surroundings to dim down while the heavens and the earth were overturned. Impossible! What sort of sword Dao is this? How could it be so terrifying? This is the inheritance of our ancient all-heaven region's sworn enemy, the Taishian Sword Emperor. Exclamations of shock, shrill cries, and furious roars resounded amidst the surging torrent of sword chi. At this moment, over 10 peak stage sword saints were heavily injured, and their expressions had changed completely. They didn't have the composed confidence they had earlier any longer. They struggled with all their might, yet they were unable to escape. That sword chi was too terrifying. It existed everywhere, and it was extremely profound and unfathomable. This caused them to recall a person, a terrifying existence that had once crushed all the sword cultivators in the ancient All-Heaven region to the point of being unable to raise their heads. The Taishian Sword Emperor. The man that was reputed to be the #1 sword emperor in the ancient Desolation region during the primeval times. When the sword chi dispersed and the dust and dirt dispersed, the heavens and the earth were in chaos, and their field of vision was filled with signs of destruction and destruction. Even the jade-green lake had transformed into an enormous and unfathomably deep ravine that was covered in cracks and crisscrossed together. On the other hand, the bodies of those 10+ peak stage sword saints were dyed red with blood and were heavily injured. Their appearances were extremely miserable, and they didn't possess the elegant demeanor from before. A single sword strike had heavily injured over 10 peak stage sword saints. Chapter 1577. My sword originates from one and returns to infinity. All things are born by me and all spirits are transformed by me. My sword is infinite and random. The true meaning of turning into a sword is as numerous as the sands of the universe. This was the opening sentence of Taishian sword scripture, which showed its profound mysteries. After Lin Sun stepped into the peak of the Saint Realm, he had cultivated 108,000 sword chi in 108,000 acupoints in his body. The previous sword started from 1 and then turned into 108,000 swords, which gathered the power of chi refining, spirit refining, and body refining, and combined with various martial arts Upanishads to produce it. Although it was just one sword, the power contained in it could be regarded as one of the most powerful killing means Lin Sun had mastered at present. The world was silent, and the solitary swordsmen were completely terrified. They were born with pride and confidence in swordsmanship. But now, in front of Lin Sun's sword, all their pride and confidence were destroyed. Now, thinking of what they had experienced just now, it made them tremble with fear. He'd heavily injured them with a single sword strike. Even if it was in the ancient All-Heaven region, it was practically impossible to find someone capable of accomplishing this. The most terrible thing was that Lin Sun was still very young and not a pure swordsman. He was also good at spiritual tattoos. What kind of freak was he? Is the one who entered this secret realm Jian Qingchen, one of the 8 invincibles of green darkness? Lin Sun asked suddenly. He was still as calm and indifferent as before, but the way everyone looked at them had changed, and there was an unconcealable fear in their eyes. Humph! If you want to kill us, just kill us. You want us to speak? Wishful thinking. Some people gnashed their teeth and faced death with equanimity. Puff! As soon as the voice fell, Lin Sun raised his hand and a wisp of sword chi swept out, killing this person on the spot. In the months since he left the camp of the ancient wasteland world, Lin Sun had been walking, searching, and cultivating all the way. His understanding of the 3-in-1 way had become more and more profound. Now, any attack that he casually threw out was extremely powerful. Not to mention an ordinary true sage, even a top sage would find it hard to block it. If before, he had touched the threshold of being undefeatable in this realm, then now, he had stepped into it and entered the next level. It was no exaggeration to say that now, as long as the peerless figures were not amazing, even the top sages could not enter Lin Sun's eyes at all. Go! Someone shouted and turned to flee. Now they were all seriously injured and had long lost the strength and courage to fight against Lin Sun. If they wanted to save their lives, they could only escape. Lin Sun didn't even look at it. With a wave of his sleeve, Taishian's sword chi swept out and slashed across the air. Puff! Blood rained down. The person who tried to escape was enveloped by the torrent of sword chi. His body instantly exploded, and he only had time to let out a miserable scream before he completely lost his life. Fight it out with him! Kill! Under the stimulation of death, the eyes of the other Absolute Land Sword Saints turned red. Their expressions were savage as they attacked together. But Lin Sun turned a blind eye to it. He stepped forward, and his body shone brilliantly, flowing with the light of the way. As he walked, beams of Taixian's sword qi whistled out, blazing brilliantly, peerlessly sharp, and swept out. Puff, puff. Everywhere he passed, figure after figure fell to the ground, and they were simply like weeds that were easily harvested. So what if they were Absolute Land Sword Saints? In the face of absolute crushing combat power, there was no difference between them and weeds. Of course, this was Lin Sun's intention. As soon as he took action, he used his strongest combat power without any hesitation. From beginning to end, he showed a devastating posture. In just 10 breaths, Lin Sun stepped to the bottom of the secret realm. Behind him, the group of solitary darkness sword saints had all been slaughtered. Silver and Tian had already flown out and skillfully cleaned up the spoils of war. In the past few months they had followed Lin Sun and seen many similar scenes, so they were not surprised. But in their hearts, even they often sighed that their master was getting more and more fierce and powerful. However, they also knew that Lin Sun had become more and more taciturn and bad-tempered because he couldn't find Zhao Jingxian for a long time. He often fought with each other because of a disagreement which had become a common thing. Before long, Silver and Tian packed up and met up with Lin Sun. Seeing that Lin Sun had no intention of talking, they didn't say anything more sensibly. Unexpectedly, at this moment Lin Sun suddenly said, "Are you worried that if I go on like this, I will become a butcher who only knows how to kill?" Silver and Tian were stunned, and then nodded at the same time. "Master, we all know that you are very worried about the safety of Miss Jingxian, but you can't embarrass yourself too much." Little Silver took a deep breath and said seriously, "I believe that Miss Jingxian is blessed by the heavens. Although there's still no news of her, it's not a bad thing. At least, it's better than the worst news." Lin Sun nodded and said with clear eyes, "I have been thinking about a problem along the way. Now I have figured it out." Silver and Tian were stunned again. What did he figure out? But Lin Sun didn't say anything more and walked towards the door of the secret realm. He was vaguely sure that the young master mentioned by all the solitary sword saints was probably Jian Qingchen, who was regarded as the #1 in the younger generation of the great heaven ancient domain. Now that he had encountered him, he naturally couldn't miss this opportunity. Jian Qingchen, the successor of the Sky Sword Pavilion, the leader of the great heaven ancient domain, ranked as one of the 8 absolutes of green darkness, was a rare genius in Sword Tao. How strong was his combat strength! Buzz, accompanied by a strange roar, Lin Sun appeared in a secret realm in the next moment. The sky was vast and blue, and there were mountains in the distance and rosy clouds. This was a picturesque secret realm full of peace and tranquility, and the air was filled with a calming aura of the Great Way. As soon as he stood in it, Lin Sun only felt that the power of the Great Way around him became extremely active, as if in an instant, he was perfectly integrated with the mountains and rivers of this world, and he could clearly feel a kind of Great Way. A strange light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. He stepped forward and spread out his divine awareness. Along the way, he saw the picturesque mountains and rivers, the magnificent scenery, green mountains and clear waters everywhere, like a pure land of immortals. Not long after, when Lin Sun passed a verdant bamboo forest, he was suddenly stunned, and his heart beat violently. Whoosh! The next moment, his figure had appeared in the depths of the bamboo forest. There was a thatched cottage built of green bamboo here. Obviously, someone had lived here before. Lin Sun lifted his foot and walked in. The bamboo building was simple, elegant and clean, with bamboo tables and futons. On the table, there was a bamboo tube, in which several light blue flowers were inserted obliquely, waiting to bloom. Lin Sun took a deep breath and calmed his mind. It's Jing Xian. She must have settled here. After a while, the gloomy atmosphere between Lin Sun's eyebrows was swept away. His black eyes were bright and he looked excited, which was rare. He didn't expect that he would come to the right place by accident this time. It seems that she has been staying here since she entered the Nine Regions battlefield. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to have the leisure to build a bamboo building. Lin Sun took a deep breath and restrained his inner excitement. But where is Jing Xian now? He turned around and walked out of the bamboo building, spreading his divine awareness to sense the surroundings. After a while, he finally caught a trace of a faintly discernible aura, and it kept drifting towards the distance. Lin Sun flew away without hesitation. But not long after, Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed. He landed on the ground, came to the grass on one side, and raised his hand to pick up a blade of grass. The grass was tender and crystal green, long and straight, but it was obviously cut by a sharp breath, and the cut was smooth. When Lin Sun sensed carefully, he keenly captured a trace of faint sword intent. This wisp of sword intent was very ordinary, almost undetectable, and very inconspicuous. But in Lin Sun's eyes it was completely different. What he saw was a vast, majestic, and incomparably domineering aura, a kind of swift and fierce aura that assaulted his face. It was like a sword hidden deep in the box. Although its sharpness was covered, when it was unsheathed, the sword light was absolutely brighter than the moon on the sea. Jian Qingchen? A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes, and his heart tightened. If Jing Xian had been here all the time, Jian Qingchen would have noticed her existence as soon as he entered this secret realm. The next moment, Lin Sun moved with all his strength without hesitation. His divine awareness spread out like a tide, following the breath left by Zhao Jingxian all the way. On the way, he also noticed that the breath suspected to belong to Jian Qingchen had always existed. Obviously, he had also found something strange and was investigating. Not long after, a roar came from afar. Lin Sun suddenly raised his head and covered it with his divine awareness. In an instant, he saw a magnificent and incomparable picture of heaven's retribution. It was a majestic and towering purple mountain. Above the mountain, dark clouds covered it like the curtain of the eternal night. Streaks of dazzling and terrible tribulation thunder rolled and roared in the clouds like pythons, making a roar like the war drums beaten by gods. This was a great and rare saint retribution. Soon Lin Sun's eyes suddenly shrank, and his divine awareness was firmly attracted by a beautiful figure standing on the top of the purple mountain. The beautiful figure was graceful and slender, wearing a fluttering skirt. Her black hair was coiled up high, revealing a picturesque, beautiful and refined white face. She stood alone on the cliff. Her graceful figure was flowing with illusory Taoist light. She was like a fairy with a kind of soul-stirring beauty. However, at this moment she looked serious, which was rare. She looked up at the sky, where the clouds of tribulation were thick and the breath of destruction was spreading. It would come soon. Jing Xian. It was really her. At this moment, Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. His eyes were bright, and his heart was full of joy. After more than a year, they finally met again. She was fine, and so was I. The joy of reunion was nothing more than this. But immediately, the joy on Lin Sun's face was replaced by a touch of coldness. His divine sense captured another aura, an aura that seemed to be ordinary and restrained, yet was actually fierce and overbearing to the extreme. Chapter 1578. Violet Mountain was lofty while tribulation clouds covered the sky, and lightning interweaved together and rumbled like war drums. A terrifying aura of destruction caused the heavens and the earth to fall into a practically suffocating and oppressive atmosphere. Jian Qingchen stood nearby with his hands behind his back, and he gazed at the graceful and beautiful figure that stood at the peak of Violet Mountain from afar, while a wisp of a secretive smile hung on his lips. Not long ago, He'd entered this secret realm with the intention of searching for a fortuitous encounter related to the Saint Tao so that he could further improve his cultivation technique. However, he'd never imagined that this fortuitous encounter had been obtained by someone else a long time ago. Then, he discovered this woman dressed in a purple robe that was as beautiful as a fairy. With Jian Qingqian's gaze, he was able to tell with a single glance that the woman possessed a unique charm that was extremely extraordinary. Obtaining the Grand Tao brand within this secret realm isn't something that just anyone can accomplish. If you're really able to overcome the tribulation successfully this time, then I don't mind sparing your life. Jian Qingqian muttered in his heart. He wore feathered clothes and had a flying sword that was tied up into a slanted bun. His appearance was handsome, and he seemed like a young noble that was full of spirit and spirit. Suddenly, Jian Qingqian noticed something, and he turned around to look. At this instant, terrifying divine light had suddenly appeared in his eyes that were calm like a lake. It was like a heavenly sword was flickering in the depths of his pupils, and it could slash through all things and crush a river of stars. At the peak of Violet Mountain, Zhao Jingxian, who was meditating and waiting to overcome her tribulation, suddenly lowered her head, and she immediately noticed Jian Qingqian, who stood on a rock in the distance. Her clear pupils constricted slightly while her heart tensed. Never had she imagined that someone would actually be hiding nearby before this calamity that was related to the success or failure of the Grand Tao. Wait, this isn't concealment. That person's cultivation is too profound, and there's no need to conceal it at all. He's just standing there casually, yet I wasn't able to notice him earlier. Zhao Jingxian couldn't help but pucker her lips when she realized this, and she sighed in her heart. As soon as the 9-region battlefield was opened, she'd been teleported to this secret realm that seemed to be isolated from the outside world. Because she couldn't find a way out, she could only wait here. For more than a year, she lived alone in a bamboo house. She meditated alone, arranged flowers alone, and thought about her worries. Not long ago, when she was cultivating in meditation, she'd inadvertently comprehended a Grand Tao brand, and she obtained unbelievable comprehension of the Grand Tao. It was also because of this comprehension of the Great Tao that she had grasped the opportunity to become a saint in one go. Today was the day of her tribulation, and after a year of accumulation, she had already made sufficient preparations for this. Even though the calamity in the sky was terrifying, her heart was fearless and calm. However, when she noticed Jian Qingqian's figure, her tranquil heart couldn't help but be slightly shaken in the end. The biggest taboo in transcending a tribulation was to be disturbed by the outside world. The absolute Empyrean divine tribulation was even more terrifying. If there was even the slightest change in one's state of mind, the power of the tribulation would take advantage of it. This was the so-called, pull one hair and the whole body will move. For a moment, Zhao Jingxuan's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Not earlier, not later. Could it be that this is a hidden calamity that purposely wants me to suffer when I'm about to become a saint? Bang! When this thought had just arisen in her mind, rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth suddenly arose from the depths of the tribulation clouds in the sky that had accumulated strength for a long time, and it caused the surroundings to tremble and all things to shake. Zhao Jingxuan's expression changed slightly. If her mental state was said to be tranquil like an ancient well before this, then the trace of unrest caused by Jian Qingqian's appearance at this moment was like a hole that had torn open her mental state. At the moment she was overcoming the tribulation, it had undoubtedly become a lethal flaw. For a time, a wisp of gloominess couldn't help but suffuse the space between her brows. However, right at this moment, a voice resounded abruptly. Jingxian, be at ease and overcome the tribulation. I'm here. This voice was so familiar, and it had coiled around her heart on countless occasions throughout this year of time. It caused Zhao Jingxian to think that it was an illusion because a flaw had appeared in her mental state. But right after that, she noticed that something was off. because a familiar figure was tearing through space from extremely far away. He wore moon-white clothes, and his black hair fluttered with the wind. His figure was still tall and dignified as before, and it was like even if the sky collapsed, it wouldn't be able to crush his backbone. It really is this fellow. Zhao Jingxuan's heart shook while her crystalline and clear eyes opened wide, and her peerlessly beautiful face that was originally covered in a wisp of gloominess glowed with a wisp of shocking extraordinary splendor. "I'm here. I'm here." That flat yet firm voice still reverberated through the heavens and the earth and lingered by her ears. Zhao Jingxian felt a lump in her throat while the rim of her eyes had turned slightly red. She took a deep breath, raised her fair and exquisite chin slightly, and spoke with an extremely proud tone. "Such a tribulation is nothing to me." Her voice was pleasing and chilly like the sound of nature, and it was filled with a cheerful and confident bearing. All of these changes were merely because he's here. In the distance, Lin soon started smiling as well, and his eyes carried a rare wisp of tenderness. Bang! The tribulation lightning in the sky was dazzling and resplendent, and it was like a dragon that whistled out. At this moment it had finally descended. Zhao Jingxuan's clothes fluttered while her graceful figure rose into the sky. Her expression was calm and focused, and her peerlessly beautiful face carried a wisp of arrogance. There wasn't a single ripple in her mental state. At the same time, Lin Sun looked at the young man who was wearing feather clothes and standing with his hands behind his back. "Jian Qingchen?" he asked. Jian Qingchen nodded and looked at Lin Sun, the uninvited guest. He said thoughtfully, "You were able to break through the blockade of a group of peak sages and enter this place. It seems that you're that Lin Sun." He had a leisurely manner and seemed very calm, but in fact, he had an extremely restrained conceit, and he fully displayed the demeanor of a peerless genius. Even Lin Sun had to admit that Jian Qingchen was indeed very different from other peak sages, as he was ranked among the 8 absolutes of green destiny and was regarded as the #1 swordsman of the younger generation in the Daluo sword domain. In the ancient desolation domain, perhaps only Yun Qingbai's demeanor can compete with this person, right? Lin Sun thought of Yun Qingbai. However, Yun Qingbai was a genius swordsman who didn't hide his strength at all. His pride and conceit were also disdainful. He was like a peerless sword that shone brilliantly, and it was as sharp as the sun, hanging high in the sky. Jian Qingchen, on the other hand, had a different kind of demeanor. He gave off a restrained and calm feeling, just like a heavy sword without a sharp edge. It was very difficult to see through his depth. "Interesting. I can actually meet you here, but it seems that you're not here to kill me." As Jian Qingchen spoke, he glanced at Zhao Jingxian, who was going through the heavenly tribulation in the distance. "Are you here for her?" Lin Sun said calmly, "That's right. So, do you plan to leave by yourself, or do you want me to send you on your way?" Jian Qingchen sneered, "Why are you in such a hurry? I'm very curious about you. Why don't we take this opportunity to have a chat?" When the two of them spoke, it was as if they were having a normal conversation. However, the area where they stood had long been filled with a formless and terrifying aura. The rocks, grass, and trees were all silently turned into powder. In the sky, the tribulation thunder rumbled, and the lightning was dazzling, shocking the world. However, as soon as the aura of the tribulation approached this area, it was swept away. This was a silent confrontation, an invisible confrontation. It seemed to be an ordinary chat, but in fact, it was more dangerous and terrible than a real battle. "So, you're not going to leave?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Jian Qingchen sighed softly and looked at Zhao Jingxian, who was going through the heavenly tribulation in the distance. He said, "It's a pity. I plan to keep her by my side after she becomes a sage, so that she can follow me to conquer the world in the future. But now it seems that if I want to take her in, I have to go through you first." Lin Sun said, "Is that why you haven't taken action yet?" Jian Qingchen nodded.
Can't you see?
The blood of a true dragon flows in this lady's veins. If she can overcome the heavenly tribulation and become a peerless sage, she will be able to awaken the true talent of the true dragon bloodline. A peerless sage dragon lady will cause a stir on the ancient path of the stars. After all, the true dragon bloodline has always been a legendary race. It's simply too rare. It's even rarer than natural saints and gods. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhao Jingxian, who was going through the heavenly tribulation in the distance. He remembered what Yan Zhanqiu, the successor of Lingbao Holy Land, said a long time ago: "You don't know how noble junior sister Jingxian is. There are few people in this world who are worthy of her, but you are definitely not one of them." At that time, Lin Sun thought that Yan Zhanqiu was venting his anger and jealousy. But now it seemed that Yan Zhanqiu had already known that Zhao Jingxuan's background was not simple. This was normal. It was said that Yan Zhanqiu's mother's family was inextricably linked with the real dragon. It was reasonable that he knew some details about Zhao Jingxian. "You're right. In my opinion, she is unique and unique. She is the only one in the world," Lin Sun said seriously. "You didn't do it before because you were greedy and wanted to possess what you shouldn't have. Am I right?" Jian Qingchen smiled and said, "It's not greed. I'm just happy to see her. As for whether I should possess her or not, it's not up to you." "So, you still don't want to give up?" Lin Sun's expression became calmer and colder. "If you decide to do it now, there will only be one result." Jian Qingchen stopped smiling and looked at Lin Sun calmly. "Either I die or you two die together. What's more, as you can see, the girl you worry about is going through the heavenly tribulation. This is the critical moment for her to become a saint. If she succeeds, she will become a saint in one step. If she fails, her soul will be destroyed. What do you think will happen to her if she is disturbed?" Lin Sun's dark eyes were cold, surging with a frightening luster. He said, "I didn't expect that a person like you would be so shameless." Jian Qingchen said indifferently, "Lin Sun, people like you and I don't care about any criticism or comments. I'm just stating a fact.